start. Wait, where the fuck's the music? Here we go. Okay. Sup, ladies and gentlemen, Acklon here, and of course, welcome back to each and every one of you. If you're watching this over on YouTube, please remember to hit the like button and also click the link in the description down below. I apologize for not being live this weekend or yesterday. Yesterday's load shedding was fucking horrendous. Like, the timing was just all weird and shit. But then also, yeah, weekends are really tough because in Cape Town, we don't have, like, we're always 1 or 2 stages below the rest of the country, except for on weekends, where sometimes we'll maybe be 1 stage, sometimes not even a stage. So what ends up happening on weekends is I have more load shedding than normal. I'm in the process of sorting that shit out, although it is on Cape Town time, which is absolutely horrendous. They're just stupid. Because people in Cape Town don't have a... Well, at least it feels like they don't have a rush. Like, nothing rushes them, you know? Everything just sort of will happen when it happens. Who knows, you know? You basically ask someone for something, like the guy that we're working with for the inverters, right? We already know which inverter we want, which batteries we want, but now we have just a couple of questions, right? So some of the questions that I have is, what will expansion look like? So if I want to get more batteries for more capacity, will those batteries work? Do I have to get another inverter? What's the story there? And then, of course, charging capacity, because every inverter has a set amount of charge that it can allow for. And you want to know beforehand, you know, if I'm going to add 2 more batteries, different. How you doing, fam? If I'm going to add 2 more batteries, what's going to happen? Like, will the inverter actually be able to charge these new batteries? Or is the inverter going to be too slow to charge them in time? All of this stuff needs to be sorted out. And so we obviously asked him questions. I mean, he takes like a day in order to respond to a single question. And it's like, dude, what the fuck? Like, I have questions, just answer them so I can give you money. Because I really just want the thing, you know? So that's been something that we've had to deal with for like a fucking while now. But hopefully soon we'll have the inverter, the air conditioners downstairs. That's another fucking story. They delivered the air conditioner, but the people that's supposed to install the air conditioner... We'll see, right? They'll let me know whenever they arrive. Ace the base, how you doing, fam? Where's the beard, right? So, funny story about the beard. Different. I went to the barber on Saturday, right? I think it was Saturday. Yeah, Saturday. And I was like, hey, so can you just clean up my beard a little, you know, just make it neat and tidy? He's like, yeah, I got you, fam. Don't worry. And I'm sort of... Like, whenever I'm at the barber, I sort of escape into my own mind. Like, I'll just sit there and just sort of dream. So I keep my eyes closed and I just sort of dream away the time, because what else am I supposed to do there, right? And I'm sitting there and I'm, you know, he's doing his thing. He's fucking shaving, clipper. And I open my eyes and he's done with this side, right? And I'm like, that's a lot shorter than what I wanted. Like, I just wanted you to sort of take care of the ends. Right, I didn't want it this fucking short, and so I didn't say anything, because what's the point, right? At that point, I could tell him, "Hey, what the fuck, bro? That's not how short I want my beard," and he'd just be like, "Oops. Well, what are we gonna do now?" So I was just like, "Well, okay, fuck. I guess I have a short beard now." So that's what happened to the beard. That's the story of the beard. Definitely not what I expected. Let's just say that. I should have, because I always do this, and for some reason I didn't do it this time. Because usually I'll tell them, I'm growing my beard. Can you just neaten it up a bit, right? Then they don't shave anything off. They just sort of neaten it up. But this time I didn't. I just went, can you just make it nice and neat? And I sort of just assumed that he would understand I don't want the whole thing off. I just want a little bit off, you know? But no, he did not understand that. Thank you very much, Ace the Base. Really appreciate that. So how's everyone doing? You know, new week, new bullshit, or maybe new week, same bullshit. I don't know. How's the new year treating you guys? Soda Fresh, how you doing, fam? I would have to be honest. I feel no different going from last year to this year. It feels exactly the same. You fucked up. Gotta go bald. Why would I want to go bald? I'm good. Oh, fuck it. I'm good. I like my hair the way that it is now. At least for now. We'll see. I'll probably get tired of this soon. I am tired though, but not sleep tired, just gym tired. I started doing this new thing at the gym, which is at the end of my workout, I do 3 minutes of cardio, right? I've never done cardio before at the gym. I fucking hate cardio. It's very boring. And I stand by that. It is super boring. Because 3 minutes in cardio feels like a lifetime. It literally feels like time is not passing. It's the closest I think you'll come to the Warp IRL. Metal Fan, Traxton, how you guys doing? So I do cardio at the gym. The last 3 minutes of my workout is a cardio workout where I go as hard as I can for 3 minutes straight. So basically just push, push, push. The way the guy that I heard learned this from described it as you basically do cardio as if someone's chasing you, right? Which is effectively what I do. So I started on the treadmill, but the treadmill wasn't working for some stupid reason. Then I had a choice between the assault bike. Donnie, how you doing, fam? Alex, how you doing? I had a choice between the assault bike and it's a skier. I don't know what the fuck it's called. Like, I don't know what its official name is, but it's a skier, right? So basically, the actions that you would go through in order to ski, like snow skiing, it mimics that. And then obviously with the resistance. So I decided, fuck the assault bike, because that shit's heavy. Like, I'm not gonna lie, I'm not ready for the assault bike. That thing kills you within 30 seconds. So I got on the skier, and obviously, you know, start as fast as I can, like just pulling that shit. And then I keep my eyes closed because I don't want to look at the clock because I have this thing, you know, a watch pot doesn't boil sort of thing. So I don't want to look at the clock. I just go. And I sort of eventually go, okay, so a minute should be done now. Let's see, right? Guess how much time has passed? 20 seconds, bro. 20 fucking seconds. It felt like I was there forever already, and I'm only 20 seconds in. I'm like, what the fuck? That was the longest 3 minutes of my life. But anyways, I get off there, right? And I'm like fucking super tired. But now I feel pretty good. Now I feel pretty decent. You get to run outside, running on a treadmill, but not moving forward. Fucks with the brain. Not sure on which podcast I heard it, but it's for real. I don't run. So, Ace to base, I don't think my knees could handle running, at least not at the moment. You know, obviously, you have to be, like, super careful. I don't have knee problems, but you could have, right? So, I first need to lose a bit of weight before I'll start running. But yeah, when I run, I will definitely run outside. I don't see the point of running on a treadmill unless it's for like short sprints, you know. So if you in your workout need to do a very short sprint, maybe like a quick run wouldn't be too bad. When I worked out, I used to love the shit out of the rowing machine. I still enjoy the rowing machine, but I find the rowing machine not that good for that particular thing, right? So going as hard as you can, as fast as you can for 3 minutes straight, the rowing machine doesn't really allow that. Like, you can go super hard, but it almost always feels like you want to go, you need to go a little bit longer on the running machine for it to really have any sort of value. Dude, what the fuck is this music? This is just super annoying. Like, they have the worst fucking music here. Hopefully this music is better. But yeah, the reason I do this is I saw Dr. Huberman. I don't know if you guys know who he is, but he made a podcast effectively talking about what you need in order to be healthy. Now, obviously, weight training is very good for you. You need to get your weight training in every single week, but just 3 times a week, 3 minutes a pop, going as hard as you possibly can, trying to get your heart rate up to 120, even higher is better, obviously, but at least 120. Van Honkerson, thank you very much, dude. Really appreciate that. Is all you need in order to be at least healthy. That's all your body needs. It's just 3 minutes, 3 times a week of like supercharged exercise. And then you should technically be relatively healthy or healthier than most people. Now I'm doing that 4 times a week because I only go to the gym 4 days a week. So let's see how it goes. Yeah, Andrew Huberman, that's the one. That's the fucking guy. So I have a video for you guys today. The only reason we're watching this is because I just fell into a massive rabbit hole, boys. I'm not gonna lie to you. If you live anywhere in the world, like on Earth, this video is gonna scare the living shit out of you. So I stumbled onto this goal, right? And I mean stumbled. And I want to read her book. So the book's name is called One Nation Under Blackmail, right? Pepsi, how you doing? Yes, I got a haircut. It's called One Nation Under Blackmail. And she basically, she used to work in mainstream media. She wrote for a mainstream newspaper. And thank you very much, Pepsi. Really appreciate that. And she eventually became disillusioned with the entire system, because she started to see the corruption on the inside of the media. And so she started looking at the US, like very specifically since the 1920s. So she goes back really far back, right? And she started looking into the details of how many of the institutions in America, how it came to be, how it was formed, like where exactly everything comes from. And in the book, she provides like literal receipts for everything. So she lays out all of the evidence that exists for it. She shows you where she got it, all of the sources, everything. And she actually claimed, she says straight up, this is publicly like available. You could find this in the public eye. It's not like they're hiding it. They just don't care because they don't think, they make this label called conspiracy theory so that whenever something comes out that sort of makes them uncomfortable, they label it a conspiracy theory and you move on. Right? So her book by mainstream media has basically been labeled, she's a massive conspiracy theorist. But she shows you, dude, like the fucking literal receipts of Hoover, right? You guys know J. Edgar Hoover, the guy that founded the FBI? He was a fucking terrible guy. He wasn't a good guy. He blackmailed the fuck out of everyone. And the reason he did that is because one of the first things that happened to him after he founded the FBI is he got blackmailed. Right? Some mayor at the time found a picture of him, or actually orchestrated the whole thing, a picture of him with one of his aides, which was a guy. And at that time in America, 2 men sort of, doing their thing, not a good look, right? Not the kind of thing you want the director of the FBI to be doing. The director of the FBI may fuck everyone else in the ass, but he's not allowed to get fucked in the ass kind of thing, right? So he used this to blackmail him effectively to get organized crime sort of overlooked and sort of, don't look too closely at some of the prohibition stuff and all the rest of it. So she goes through receipts after receipts after receipts, bro. It is fucking scary. It is scary. And I'm inclined to believe it because you look at the system and a lot of the things she says, you go, yeah, that sounds so fucking right, though. That sounds about right. So we'll watch that if you guys do not mind. Well, if you mind, that's fine too. You can watch something else. But I will be watching that. Metal fan from hell, why are you already in hell? What's happening? Very good interviewer and awesome guests. Diary of a CEO podcast. Grimfield, how you doing, fam? I have no idea. I cycle everywhere, so got basics covered. Thinking of getting gym membership though. The gym is amazing, dude. I'm not gonna lie to you. As sore as it leaves me every single day, it is fun. It's super fun. Just for the feeling afterwards, it's an incredible feeling. When you leave the gym, you're tired, you're spent, but your mind feels so fucking good, bro. Nightlight, how you doing? No, we haven't started yet. I'm waiting for people to filter in before we go down the rabbit hole. I'm gonna pull all of you down the rabbit hole with me. If you don't like sort of uncomfortable truths, this is definitely not the day that you want to be in this stream. General life that sucks a bit, complemented by a brain that sees the worst in everything and everyone, and of course my username. This makes sense, Metal Fan. This makes sense. Refreshing haircut, I see. Thank you very much. Really appreciate that. It's funny that most of you comment on the haircut, but not the beard. I thought the beard was more important than the hair. No? My coffee is on my side. I have my coffee right here. I have my water right here. And I have my vape right here. So I'm good. Oh, for those of you that like Warhammer, I just started begrudgingly listening to Horus Rising. Because I've given up on the idea of ever finding that fucking book IRL. So I decided, screw it, I'll just start listening to that. Well, beard is also hair. Yeah, I don't know if that counts, though. If you tell someone nice haircut, they don't immediately think, oh, they're talking about my beard too. Right? Do you use any supplements for gymming? No, Jake. None whatsoever. I don't see the point, right? Your body produces everything that it needs in order to be healthy. I don't see the point of taking things like creatine. We also now know that creatine is linked to a lot of bad fucking things that happen to people that take it. It's not good. It's not as if it's completely innocent. And one of the main reasons it usually isn't is creatine is found in a lot of foods, right? But usually when you find it in those foods, it'll have other elements and minerals and vitamins and sort of essentials that help your body break down the creatine. Whereas if you take creatine in powdered form or whatever the case may be, it has none of that, right? So your body is now forced to take care of that shit all by its fucking lonesome. I don't think any of that's necessary. I think as long as you have a decent diet, and you hit the gym, like, look, I don't want to be huge, right? I don't care about biceps the size of a fucking truck or any shit like that. I just want to be healthy. So maybe, if you really want to be super large and shit, yeah, get yourself some steroids, shoot up. You're gonna get very fucking strong very quickly. I don't want any of that. I just want to be healthy. So for me, supplements would be a stupid thing. Oh, I used the base. What saddens me is how long it's going to take for us to actually get the first Warhammer 40k series and movies and stuff, because they take so long to make that shit. It's not like we can look forward to it next year. It's probably going to be at the soonest 2025 when we'll finally see like something out of the Warhammer. And yeah, Metal Fan's actually correct there. It could be 2026, depending on, the scope of what they're trying to make. But then we do have that animation series that's coming out now. And that's going to be really cool, I think. Because that will at least hold us over until Henry Cavill comes up with his movie, which I'm seriously looking forward to. Some of us will die by then. What? Massey, why are you deciding that some of us will die? That's a dark thought. Like, why? What's going to kill us? Which model they go with? So, here's a question, chat. Which model should they go with? Like, if you could choose, which plotline and storyline do you think they should start with? If it's Eisenhorn, it could be sooner, since they've been making it for years now. Wait, how do you know they've been making it for years now? Henry Cavill literally just stepped into that. Probably going to start with Eisenhorn or Caiaphas Cain or Caiaphas Cain. To nudge people into the universe, Caiaphas Cain is probably better for it. Eisenhorn show has been announced years ago. Yeah, but I don't think the Eisenhorn show will be played by Henry Cavill. Henry Cavill is doing his own thing in the Warhammer universe. So it might be that Eisenhorn is already being done with other people, and that Henry Cavill is now sort of doing the next thing there, right? That would be my guess, at least. Henry is EP and star of at least the first series. Fan, what do you mean? Six months ago, someone mentioned that it's in development, but shooting hasn't started yet. Do we think they can overuse it? So here's actually a very good question. Do you think should they use Henry Cavill in a position or a role that would limit the amount of times that he can play in movies in Warhammer 40k? Because here's where I'm sort of weirded up at. If you gave Henry Cavill a very specific position, right? He's only going to feature in that one specific time. Whereas if you gave him something like Guilliman, right? He's going to feature forever because Guilliman is effectively always there. So I'm not sure. I'm not even sure if he would be able to play Reboot Guilliman, but if he could, it would be cool because then every single movie almost would be Henry Cavill. I don't know if they'll make a new character. They might, but Games Workshop is pretty strict, I think, with how they introduce characters and stuff into the game or into the universe. The time Henry visited Warhammer World is probably when the deal was struck, which was in February or maybe a bit sooner. I would overplay the hell out of him because he is committed and nerdy as fuck. Plus, he has name recognition. All of us nerds like Henry Cavill, right? Anyone else they use, it's just sort of like, yeah, they're just playing it for the money. They don't give a fuck. But with Henry, you kind of know he likes the universe, so he's not going to fuck it up. It could be like that movie where he just plays everyone. I don't think they should do that. Too many materials to use? Man, this Warhammer will be so huge. True. A Warhammer Cinematic Universe will be endless. You guys think that Marvel has a lot of movies? Can you imagine if Games Workshop go as hard on their films as Marvel does? Just imagine that for a second. How many films could you do every single year with no overlap? Like literally zero overlap between anything. What I'm talking about is like you have the Iron Man movie and you have the fucking you have the Thor movie and you have the Spider-Man movie and you have the Captain America movies. You have all of these movies playing out, right? Falcon and fucking Black Panther and all the rest of it. And there's little to no overlap unless there's cameo appearances by some of the other actors, but the universes are entirely their own thing. And then, you know, whenever you have like the Avengers, those universes will sort of merge into a single one. Like, just imagine the scope of the amount of movies that you could make just on the Imperium alone, right? We're not even talking about a movie about the Necrons, for example, or a movie about the Aldari, or even a movie about the Orcs. We're literally just talking with the Imperium itself. The amount of movies that you could make where very little overlap would be needed. You could have completely different actors playing it, completely different directors, producers, all the rest of it, because, well, at any given point in the Warhammer universe, there is a ton of things happening at exactly the same time across the galaxy, right? Like kids experiencing gore movie for the first time. Like, look, I do think that I think that Warhammer 40k is gonna upset a lot of people. That's true. I do believe that there's gonna be a lot of angry people. But will they have large viewership? Just did a quick search, and there are only 2.4 million Warhammer 40k fans worldwide. Massey, I don't think that's accurate at all. What's that based on? Like, where did you find that search? Or where did you find those numbers? What purpose does fingernails and belly buttons have? I have no idea, Cheese Pizza. Like, just so that you don't look weird, and for girls so they look sexy? I don't know. What the fuck? I don't have a fucking clue. Let's see this, right? Oh my god, that's wrong. This is South Africa, what the fuck? Worldwide. It's not really showing me anything specific. Although Denmark seems to be obsessed with Warhammer 40k, bro. Newton alone has 700k subs, so I'd wager there are a bit more 40k fans than 2 million. I think there's loads more. The Goonhammer 2022 reader survey. So what's that survey based on? Can you link it to me, Massey? I would like to see what that survey is based on. Because I think a lot of that will will very largely depend on how they collected all of that. We recently took pause to reach out to you, our readers, to learn more about you and ask you how we're doing. You responded with gusto. In total, we received over 3,000 responses and over 4,500 comments to our reader survey in just 5 days. In total, we recorded 76% response rate, which is frankly fantastic. We're confident that this is one of the largest independent surveys of hobbyists ever, and we're more than buoyed by your enthusiasm for the hobby and our work. As promised, we want to share some of what we learned, respond to some representative comments, and look forward on the upcoming year for Goonhammer. Understanding the Warhammer player universe, this is something that we discuss a lot internally because it's something we're constantly trying to do. We also occasionally see discussion about the player set with a sort of cultural divide between competitive and casual players. More on that in a bit. At the core of the issue, I'd suggest that it's really, really difficult to understand what the Warhammer player base looks like. Players run the gamut from top players in the ITC to kids playing on their floor. If you step back for a minute and look at Warhammer 40k, Games Workshop's most popular game, then you can do some back of the napkin math using different communities to get a game size. At game sizes. Tournament players in 2021 standing recorded just over 13,300 players in what was the biggest year yet for competitive events. Of these, the majority recorded only one event score. The competitive Warhammer subreddit, which is primarily 40k, has about 67,000 members. So at most, around 1 in 6 of those members have likely played in an ITC recorded competitive event in the past year. The Warhammer 40k subreddit, which is primarily casual and hobby content, has 462,000 members. So we can estimate around 1 in 6 of the engaged online audience for 40k is into competitive discussion and content online. Based on site traffic stats we can assess, we'd estimate that the mothership site sees around 2.8 million monthly visitors. Of those, we need to weed out the players who are only Age of Sigmar, but we'll use our survey data for that. About 15% of our AOS players only play AOS, and so we'd estimate that about 2.4 million of the people heading to Warhammer community each month are 40k players. Okay, so a couple of issues right off the bat here, Massey, with these numbers. This is only players. So these are not people that is interested in the universe. These are not people that sort of follow along for the story, that play the video games, that are fans of the video games. These are only people that is engaged in the actual playing of the game. And by that, I mean tabletop game, because all of this sort of speaks towards tournament players and players that's at least taken part in one tournament. So they're estimating there's about 2.4 million people, right, that play Warhammer 40k. But I'm into Warhammer 40k. I love Warhammer 40k. I've never played it. I've never played the tabletop. I would assume that most people are like me, where they love the universe, they love learning about the universe, they love the lore and the story, They don't really give a fuck about playing the tabletop. Maybe they'll do it once in their life, but they're not. In this chat, how many of you love the universe, but you've never actually played it? There we go. Cambelar is already here saying they've never played it, but they do love the universe. Grumfield, Van Honkerton, Traxiton, Alcatraz, Calivan. Yeah, there's the thing, right? So we would probably have to take that number and times it by a lot in order to get the actual numbers. King Julian, how you doing, fam? I would argue that Games Workshop is probably a hell of a lot larger than what most people... I would not be surprised if Games Workshop's Warhammer 40k is one of the largest fantasy universes on the internet today. And by fantasy, I mean very specifically gaming universes. I would not be surprised. Me, albeit we can change that right now with the help of Tabletop Simulator. Just good luck finding the best version of 40k on the workshop, because I got no idea. No idea either. I have to pee, bro. Fuck. Give me a second. I'll be right back. Boys, I hate water. I hate water. It makes me piss so much, dude. I fucking hate it. Give me a box of Custodes, Virtus Predators in about an hour, just so I can have a decent 1,000-point army for the Battle of the New Year event that is held in my local Warhammer store this Sunday. Fucking hell. Yeah, beer does the same thing, but water really fucks with me, bro. Like, I've been to the bathroom today. Oh my god, probably 22 times already. It's nuts. To be fair, though, I've been drinking a lot of water. Like, I've already finished about 3 of these. So, that's probably why. But I do not like water all that much. Like, Pepsi doesn't do that to me. When I have Pepsi Max, it doesn't make me piss as much. So, I don't know what the hell's wrong. I don't know what happens. Virtus Praetors and Custodes Achilles and Galatas Dreadnoughts are amazing models. King Julian, I'm telling you now that Pepsi doesn't do that to me, so shut the fuck up, bro. Waterus, my fish is fucking... Your statement about 40k being the most popular fantasy game setting might be contested by stuff like Warcraft and Final Fantasy XIV. Van Onkerton, I don't think World of Warcraft or Final Fantasy XIV comes close. So, with World of Warcraft, it stands to reason that the majority of people that would be interested in the universe would also be playing it, right? So, we could probably say, okay, let's imagine that a lot of the people that aren't playing it, or let's imagine that there are a few people, right, that aren't playing but do like the universe. And I know there are people like that, but I know also that it's very rare. In my own life, the majority of people that I know that stopped playing it also no longer give a shit about the story. Sorry, I have a phone call. Give me 2 seconds, boys. Hello? Sorry, boys. People from the air conditioning wanting to know when they can install it. So I do apologize for wasting your time. So the point I was trying to make, Van Honkerton, is even then, right? So let's look at World of Warcraft at the height of WoW, right? That was 12 million people. Even if we times that by 2 and we say that of the 12 million people, there's still, all of the 12 million people are still interested in the game, which I don't think is possible, right? But even then, right, it puts you on 24 million people, which isn't in alignment with anything else we're seeing. Because here's the thing, if you're gonna get if you have people that don't play the game but is interested in the universe, that would translate to YouTube views. That would translate to YouTubers and viewership numbers and subscriber numbers and things like that. And I don't think it actually translates. I think when you look at the majority of YouTubers out there, and I'm talking across the board, I'm not sure, is Noble the largest YouTuber right now for WoW, or is it Balula? So Noble has 605. How many does Balula have? Let's just quickly see here. Balula has 623, right? But if we look at the views on Balula's videos, we can say that of that 600, not all of those are active. Right? A lot of those are probably not active anymore. Most likely, almost half, if not more, are subscribers that they've moved on. They no longer play the game. They no longer give a shit about the game, but they also never unsubbed. So they're just sort of hanging out there. I don't think it translates, if I'm honest with you. Because we can now, let's compare this. Let's look at Noble, right? Let's just look at Noble's most recent videos. So you look at Noble's most recent videos, 82k, 29k, 91k. It's not bad. These are brilliant views. There's nothing wrong with this. But then we go to Luton, right? So if we go to Luton 09, 770k views, 2.9 million K views, 4.2 million K views, 1.1 million, 920k. And I didn't do anything weird or strange here. Literally, this is what the landing page is. This is what we're looking at, right? You can see just by the amount of views, Warhammer is more popular than WoW, right? And I think the same is true for Final Fantasy. Jake, in no way. Actual shops that sell boxes of models? Dude, Warhammer is huge. South Africa even have shops. This is how you know Warhammer is huge. There are no shops in South Africa that sells anything Final Fantasy related. There are no shops in South Africa that really sell anything World of Warcraft related unless by accident they have it. There's an actual shop that sells everything Warhammer related. Like everything, from the paint to the models to the source books, everything is sold by this shop. That's how you know it's a popular fucking game. Because every single place points to Luton as the premier lore videos YouTuber, including the main Warhammer 40k Reddit. Yeah, but we can look at other people as well. Let's go to newer people, right? Major Kill. Let's look at Major Kill. Let's look at his general videos, right? So Major Kill, 142k, 92k. He has 435k subscribers. 93k, 142k, 240k, 228k, 322k, 206k, 174k. The point I'm making with this, right? The point is views to subscribers on point. Almost every single one of these videos is getting at least close to or over half of the views of the actual subscribers that he has. That's a sign of a very healthy community, and a community that is actually growing. We can look at Wastehammer here as well. Now, of course, some of that has to do with the actual content creators, but I don't believe that Luton or Major Kill is any better than Noble or Balula as far as content creators go. Noble is a top tier content creator. He's very good at what he does. His knowledge of World of Warcraft is literally unmatched, I would say. His videos is in a very similar style to that of Luton09. And Noble isn't getting anywhere near the views that Luton is pulling. So I don't think so. Okay, so let's look at Wastehammer. He has 520k subscribers. One thing that should be made sort of clear here, Wastehammer made got a lot of his subscribers from shorts, if I'm not mistaken. Did he not start with shorts? Pretty sure he started with shorts, which is actually incredibly easy to gain a lot of subs. Those subs rarely, though, translate into actual video views. It takes a long time to get those subs to actually look at your long-form content. But even then, 110k, 154k, 801k, 504k, 248k, 648k. Nah, bro. I think it's fairly... I don't think it's an exaggeration to say Warhammer is large. Like, seriously large. I think the only sort of fantasy universes that will probably match Warhammer would be Lord of the Rings. I personally don't think that Warhammer is bigger than Lord of the Rings. Harry Potter, obviously. I mean, that was a global phenomena, right? I think those might be the only two, unless I'm forgetting some. Star Wars might actually challenge that show, just because they're more mainstream. If you just follow mainstream stuff, you won't have a fucking clue about Warhammer. Let's be honest. If it wasn't for you guys telling me to check out Warhammer, I never would have even known. I'll be super honest with you guys. The first time I heard of Total War Warhammer, I thought it was just like every other Total War game. I did not know that Total War Warhammer was actually related to a game, like an actual universe. I thought it was just sort of, they got tired of doing the historical battles and they just decided to go a different route with it. And then obviously, as I got deeper and deeper into gaming and sort of, specifically gaming lore, I would hear about Warhammer, but I think the first time I actually got properly told about Warhammer was from Apocalypse, one of my mods, because he's very much into Warhammer Fantasy. That's the first time I heard about it. In the mainstream, you will never hear anything about Warhammer 40k. It's not a mainstream thing. It's a very niche sort of gaming experience. With large fan bases, but lore that requires digging to find does quite well in this sense. Souls games are the same. The lore is deep, but never really presented, so the content does really well on YouTube. That might be true, Jimbo, but then again, is lore really that difficult in Warhammer to find? I mean, the amount of books they have, the lore is pretty much there, right? You just have to buy a book. Because Warhammer fans love their lore and engage in it a lot, just like the reason why a lot of YouTubers and streamers boom in subscribers when they start reacting to Warhammer videos, because a lot of us love to know how other people see our little corner of nerd space. I don't think your corner is that little, though, Metal Fan. That's the point I'm trying to make. Let's hope Henry Cavill's show or movie can catch the mainstream and pull more eyes. I think it is gonna. If they treat it with respect and they actually stick to what the story is, I don't think... I'm gonna be honest with you. I think it's going to explode and it's not gonna stop growing. That's my personal opinion. I think it's gonna explode. So now I have a question for all of you, right? You guys get to choose this. It's based quite literally on how you feel about what you want to know. This is the video that I want to watch, right? The woman is called Whitney Webb. She wrote a book called One Nation Under Blackmail. All right? Very interesting shit. My question to you is, there's a first part of this interview. Right? She's done a bunch of interviews with different people, but this specific girl, Natalie Brunel, she's done a first part of that. Do you guys want to watch part 1 first, so that you actually know what the fuck is going on, or do you not care? Fans are really dedicated, though. If we can check who watched up to what Warhammer 40k channels, we would see a huge intersection between channels. But it's like that's true for all universes, though. In World of Warcraft, the same thing. There's massive overlap. Like I can see that, right? But how you doing, man? I can see that just in my own on my own channel. Like let me quickly find that for you. Wait, I'll show you. Just in my own channel, if we go to audience, right? There you go. Channels your audience watches. Asmongold, Balila, Asmongold Clips, Doran's Movies, Nexium, Taliesin Evital, Noble, Balila Clips, Athalarius, Signs of Kalani, Soul So Breezy, Balila News, Mr. GM, Eisen, Marcelian Online, and there's probably more. But that's just in the last 28 days. So the overlap, PayDNC, how you doing, fam? Thanks for the follow, man. Really appreciate that. The overlap is immense, right? That's always going to be the case, though. So, Van Honkerton, I want to watch this video. This video specifically. First time I've ever caught you live. Hey, bro. Very happy to have you here. This is the video that I want to watch, right? It's from Whitney Webb. But this is number 2 from Whitney Webb. This is her second time on this podcast. So, do you guys want to watch the first time first so you have an idea of what's going on? Or will you trust me to just fill you in if ever something is said that you don't quite understand? Because I've watched the first part already. That's why I want to watch the second part, because the first part was scary as fuck. Well, it looks like it. National security, state corruption, surveillance, and blackmail. It looks like it's the same. Alright, so a small recap of the first part for those of you that don't know. So this Whitney Webb wrote a book called One Nation Under Blackmail. She basically did an incredible job. The book is 900 pages. It's a 2-part book. There's 2 parts to it. The people that have already read it, I literally want to buy it because I really want to read it, says it's incredibly dense because there's no stories, there's no fluff. It's literally facts. She lays out all of the evidence, shows you how she got the evidence, you know, how she arrived at it, and then tells you what actually is going on. But she basically did a massive study, and all of the evidence shows that the American government, as it exists today, is basically run by organized crime. It's an organized crime syndicate. That's it. From the CIA to the FBI to the government, everyone is controlled by some version of not necessarily a cabal or anything like that, but literally just crime. People that make a shit ton of money off of politicians passing certain laws and doing certain things. For example, the Jeffrey Epstein stuff, she highlights all of the reasons why we should be very suspicious about the suicide of Jeffrey Epstein. One of the examples here is Jeffrey Epstein hung himself, right? On the night in question, none of the cameras in the prison actually worked. All of the guards were asleep, and the place where he decided to hang himself, he would have had to be almost in the fetal position to do it. Because he's a very tall guy, he wouldn't have been able to just hang there. His feet was touching the ground when they found him. Right? Like, his feet was touching the ground, which means you so desperately wanted to kill yourself that you just held your feet up, right? Because technically speaking, there wasn't enough space for him to hang without his feet touching the ground, right? And all of this is like public knowledge. She shows you exactly where to find it, how to find it, what to do. She talks about Ghislaine Maxwell. He's sort of second in command, and her father that was also murdered or died in a plane crash, and then they found his body and there was a hole in his head, which wasn't caused by the plane crash. So there's like a whole... She follows the clues and she basically gives you the evidence that she's found. And then I think she leaves you very much to sort of make up your own mind about what you read and what you see and how all of these things play together, and also what the plans are moving forward. So that's sort of the brief 40,000 foot overview of the first one, but she goes into a hell of a lot more detail, and that's why I want to read the book, because in the book she actually goes into a lot more detail on everything, like from the formation of the FBI, the CIA, how all of these organizations came to be, the information around these organizations and what they do. She doesn't do the alien thing, Massey. That's not her area of expertise. So for that, we'd have to watch some, what's his name? Alex. We'd have to watch Alex for aliens, and that's not happening. But all right. I'm gonna watch this, and yeah.
Hello, everybody. I'm Natalie Brunell. Thank you so much for checking out my show, where I get to hear from the leading voices in Bitcoin, financial markets, political structures, philosophy.
I just want to say, because in the final moments, this lady asks her about Bitcoin. Now, I have something for people that believe in Bitcoin, right? The main thing that Bitcoin people believe is that this is a form of freedom, right? When the government clamps down and the government controls all the money, Bitcoin will allow us to be free and do our own thing. The question I have for you, and this is literally to anyone that cares about Bitcoin, I have a simple question for you. Why would the government allow you to exist and use a currency that they cannot control? That's it, right? If you are correct and the government really is going to create this currency and they're going to control what we spend it on, and we won't be able to save money and we won't be able to hoard money, well, then why... The government has never shared power with anyone. Why will they decide to start sharing it now? I don't think... Personally, I think crypto can be in our future, but that's the very, very far future. I do not believe... I think the government is going to shut down crypto. The American government is never going to fucking allow a currency that they cannot control to just exist. It's not going to happen ever.
And more. Please make sure you're subscribed to the show. And if you're watching this on YouTube, like this video so more people see it, and hit that notifications button so you don't miss out on any new content. This podcast does not provide financial advice. It is for educational and entertainment purposes
this girl
only.
Is pretty cute.
So make sure you always do your own research
I'll buy
before
some
making
fucking
any
Bitcoin,
financial
all right?
decisions, and be aware of your risk tolerance. I'm able to produce this show thanks to my sponsors, and I'm very picky about who I choose to partner with. So I hope you'll take the time to listen to the ad reads throughout the show. All right, now to my main partner, Swan Bitcoin. I'm proud to partner with Swan because it is a Bitcoin-only company focused on helping people save
Hollywood
for their
is big in
future and
crypto.
self-custody their
Everyone
Bitcoin,
is big in
not
crypto,
trade it.
but I do think
Swan offers a private client service.
I do think that there's a lot of people that's big into
and even
crypto
home equity conversion.
purely
Swan
because
is
they
also
can get
committed to
away with not
educating
paying
millions
taxes
of future
as a
Bitcoiners
result
through
of that,
free educational
right?
resources and media projects.
I think most
use
rich
dollar
people
cost
buy
average
into
every
Bitcoin
day.
because
I
it's a
deposit
way
a
to not
little
have
bit
to
every
pay
day that's
taxes,
equivalent to what I might spend on a
because
meal,
you only pay
because I
taxes
actually
on
read
what
that
you
dollar
make,
cost averaging daily
right?
ends up with a
You
lower
don't,
cost
and as long
basis
as you
than
don't
weekly
withdraw
or
your
biweekly
money,
at the end
you
of the
don't have to
given
pay
year.
taxes on it
Swan
because
also
technically you
produces
haven't
my
made
show,
anything
Hard
yet.
Money, which reports on Bitcoin adoption and macro trends around the world. So make sure to subscribe to that as well. And to learn more and get $10 in free Bitcoin when you sign up, head to swanbitcoin.com/Natalie Brunell. All right, it's time for the show.
Let's go.
Welcome back. I'm so excited to have with me again today Whitney Webb. Whitney's an investigative journalist. She published a 2-volume incredible book called One Nation Under Blackmail about government corruption and really the ties between government and intelligence that led to the rise of Jeffrey Epstein. And Whitney, your work is so incredible. Thank you so much for joining me again, because you are my most popular guest, most viewed, most listened to.
Oh, well, great. Well, it's wonderful to be back. Thanks, Natalie.
So I want to start out actually by reading a quote. I'm going to kind of paraphrase a little bit or shorten it because you put this right at the beginning, right before chapter 1. And I found it to be so emblematic of the theme of your entire book. So it says, and it's a quote: "Who are these people? They're the group that is popularly called the Enterprise. They are in and outside the CIA. They are CEOs. They are bankers. They are presidents. They own airlines. They own national television networks. They do not give a damn about the law or the Constitution or the Congress or the oversight committees, except as something to be subverted and manipulated and lied to. They deal in innuendo and character assassination and planted stories. They burn and shred files if caught, they commit perjury, and when caught, they have guaranteed sinecures with large US corporations. If you let them, they will take over not only the CIA, but the entire government and the world, cutting off dissent, free speech, a free media, and they will cut a deal with anyone, from the mafia to Saddam Hussein, if it means more power and money. They are ripping off America at a rate never before seen in history. They ruin their detractors and they fear the truth. If they can, they will blackmail you. Sex, drugs, deals, whatever it takes." This is from a former CIA officer. And really, your book paints the picture of
Jesus.
how this.
So wait, that's a former CIA guy that said that? Dude, that's a little wild. Now, in almost all, so I was watching this podcast this morning called The White Pill with Dave Smith and Michael Malice, where they basically go through a lot of this, right? Where even in the darkest times, in the darkest corporations and institutions, companies and corporations that wish to control and subvert and kill, there's always people that's willing to do good. There's always people that's willing to stand up. Think about Edward Snowden, for example. You know, this guy worked for the NSA. He's part of the quote-unquote enemy class, and yet he looks at what the government is doing and he says, what the fuck? Right? This is just not on. This is not okay. He spills the beans, right? He tells the American public, this is what they're doing. And quite frankly, in what can only be described as disgust, the American public goes back to their lives as if nothing had happened. You know, it's all good. Edward Snowden isn't allowed to return to America, even though what he did was stand up for your right to freedom and to privacy. And you guys just go, yeah. What ifs? You know, and just continue with your lives. That's a little disgusting. And it's not just you, it's all of us. But at the same time, you know, Americans should care about this a hell of a lot more than the rest of the world, because, you know, the NSA might be very active in the rest of the world, but you know for a fact they're incredibly active within the US. It's known that states are the most corrupted country. Corrupted these days? Wait, what the fuck am I reading? Okay, there we go. Nice shot. It's known that states are the most corrupted country in the world. All their money debts is billions. True.
This has been happening for decades. So why did you choose to start with that quote?
Well, like you said, I felt like it was a really good summary of the network I'm trying to outline. So what he referred to, so Bruce Hemmings, who said this, is a former CIA guy who turned whistleblower during the Iran-Contra hearings. So, you know, he's referring, in talking about the enterprise, he's talking about Iran-Contra, the nexus within the national security state that, of course, extends beyond just the U.S. national security state, that was responsible for most of Iran-Contra, that's referred to in the Iran-Contra hearings and investigations and elsewhere, as, you know, well, they sort of auto-referred to themselves as this as well, as the enterprise. So basically what I'm trying to show in the book is how the enterprise sort of came to be, and how blackmail is a really key part of that story, and how it's really the same nexus is very much tied up with the Epstein story as well. And that's why it's really
There's shit about Epstein that I think a lot of people don't even think about. So Jeffrey Epstein, right? He's this unknown guy that rises to incredible power. Like, this guy has influence with the CIA, the FBI, the US government. He gets offered positions at universities. This guy rubs shoulders with the richest people in the world. He's personal friends with Bill Clinton and with, basically the Clintons as a rule. He's friends with Donald Trump. He's friends with so many fucking people, right? How? Why? This guy gets given information about the U.S. government and things that he should technically not know. One of the aides that worked either for Bill Clinton or for Trump, when Epstein was arrested, he was told in no uncertain terms, let him go. He's intelligence. That's it. Let him go, he's intelligence, which, according to many, is basically code for he's above your pay grade. If you do anything, if you prosecute him, you'll lose your job. It's as simple as that. This guy outranks you, he can do whatever the fuck he wants. And then, of course, when finally the heat got too heavy, they got rid of him. You know, when they could no longer save him because everything was now becoming public, that's when they realized, okay, well, fuck it, we'll just off him. Which sort of, to me, just in a way, suggests we might be dealing with two different things here. We have the inner circle. These are the people that I don't think we even know about. So I'm going to be honest with you guys. If we're talking about a group of people that control pretty much everything and everyone through money, bribes, you know, all the rest of it, blackmail, most of us immediately think of people like Bill Gates, people like Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, those guys, the Rockefellers, and so on and so forth. But what if those guys are simply the public faces and the people that truly wield the power are not even known? Like, we don't even know that they exist. You look at companies like Vanguard, you look at companies like BlackRock. We don't even know who their investors are because they don't have to make that public. We don't know who owns most of BlackRock or Vanguard. We know some, but we don't know everyone. So there's a good chance that the true people pulling the strings are not even known to us. We've never even heard of them. We only hear of the people that sort of, the puppets, the ones who tout the bullshit that the masses sort of walk after.
No coincidence that you start having when you start looking into the Epstein intelligence connections and all of this. It takes you back to the 1980s and allegations of his involvement with major actors in the Iran-Contra scandal. So as I note a lot in the earlier part of the book, or volume 1, and as I've said in a lot of interviews, Jeffrey Epstein was not an anomaly, especially when it came to sexual blackmail, and that a lot of people that he was around that are probably even better known names, or at least before 2019, were better known names than Jeffrey Epstein, like Adnan Khashoggi, or even institutions like the Bank of Credit and Commerce International, BCCI. All of these were involved. You know, there was a huge involvement in sex trafficking and sex blackmail. Some of it, in the case of BCCI, it was remarkably.
Here's another thing for you guys, just to throw a little bit more sort of weirdness on it. The media covers Jeffrey Epstein, right? When this finally came out and, everything sort of exploded. But only up until 2007. The only thing the media covers about Jeffrey Epstein is the sexual crimes. Right? That's it. Nothing else. Nothing else gets covered. But this guy has been operating for years prior to 2007. Like, according to this girl, Jeffrey Epstein's, the worst things he did had nothing to do with sex. The sex trafficking and stuff like that, that was just a hobby for him. The true bad shit that this guy did was in money laundering across the world for massive governments, massive corporations, very bad people that this guy basically laundered money to and gave financial advice about how to get your money in and out of countries that otherwise would probably not be allowed. That's, according to her, the real issues, and yet no one talks about it. Not a single journalist have ever spoken about his financial crimes or the stuff that he's done financially. They all focus on everything since 2007.
Similar to what Epstein would later do, and arguably even worse, because they targeted children even younger than Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell targeted. And this was a bank with major intelligence connections. And so if institutions themselves can do this and engage in this type of activity, we have a lot of questions we should be asking ourselves. And also in light of what, recently happened with this, the firing of the Attorney General in the Virgin Islands right after she filed suit against JP Morgan in relation to that bank's connection with Epstein, and specifically Epstein's sex trafficking operation. How involved was JP Morgan? What did they know, and why was the Attorney General fired right after that? Looking at the banks, at the financial
I remember
angle
that
of
story.
this I've argued many times, is the thread that they don't want people to pull on at all, but it's very much interwoven in with this theme of sex blackmail and the subversion of our institutions. And it goes hand in hand with financial criminality, and you
Mhm.
see this pattern happen over and over again. And what I'm trying to show in the book is that there's a particular network. They've evolved over time. They're not the same, they were in the 30s and 40s. A lot of the stuff they did in the past, they justified as necessary because of necessary to contain or stop the spread of communism. But then they end up working with those same adversary nations, the communist regimes, to further their own money and power. And Bruce Hemmings, in that particular quote you were starting off with, noted that specifically, that they're willing to make deals with organized crime in the Soviet Union, make deals with, the national security state of China, that are supposed to be our adversaries, and the national security state has committed all of these crimes supposedly because it was necessary to stop the expanse of those nations. But this same group is passing them sensitive military technology, engaged in arms trafficking, all other sorts of stuff to the benefit of those nations. And so it becomes abundantly clear that what this group cares about is expanding their own money and power. And they care about control. And this is ultimately, if at least one of, if not the most powerful faction that we have in the Western world right now running the show. Because if this is the entity that essentially controls the U.S. government, the U.S. government is an empire. It's U.S. empire, sort of the successor to the Anglo Empire, the British Empire. And some people argue that it's the Anglo-American Empire today, not necessarily wrong on that point. But that includes numerous states. That includes a lot of Europe. That includes a lot of Latin America, which has client states friendly to the U.S. installed on a regular basis throughout the 20th century. It's very extensive,
Dude.
the reach of this network. And it really can't be ignored at this point, especially when we're seeing all these major plays economically to install systems that are really more control systems and
Massey, not necessarily. Not necessarily. So you fall into the same trap that so many fucking people do when it comes to this stuff. So what looks more strange and weird, right? Someone comes out with a book that basically exposes the truth, and 2 days later they die. Oh shit. Suddenly, everyone is going, what the did they know? What did they know? Why were they killed? How did this happen? Sort of weirdly. Or you come out with a book and nothing happens. No one does anything. And then people like you go, yeah, if this was true, she would have been killed long ago, and they wouldn't have let the book go. That's exactly what they want. If true, of course. We don't know. But that's what I would do. That's what I would do. Just don't do anything. Because if you don't do anything, you can trust that the masses will be like, oh yeah, if this was true, you would never have been able to get your book out. So shut the fuck up, please. There's no conspiracy. There's nothing wrong here. There's nothing weird. I'll give you a great example of that happening in South Africa. There's a guy that wrote a book called The President's Keepers, right? All of this has been justified and verified, so much so that the national government was forced to start criminal proceedings against the previous president as a result of this book. The book exposes everything that they did. The guy had to release the book in the most sneaky of ways. And he struggled to find a publisher that was willing to work with him. It took him fucking, I think, almost a year and a half to find a publisher. Because most of the publishers he showed it to were like, nah, bro, we're not touching this. No, good luck. And then he finally found a publisher that was smaller, but willing to take a chance. They were willing to go, okay, fine, we'll do it. And he basically, all he could do was release the book and then sort of fucking hope that nothing happens. Now, you know, in this case, people read it in South Africa, and because the people in South Africa are actually fed up with the government, they believed it. And so a lot of noise started happening around the national government, to the point where the national government was like, well, we can't ignore this. We have to do something. And so they put on this massive show of a criminal proceeding, and, you know, a judge that finds people guilty and sort of listens to all of the evidence. Nothing's probably going to happen, but they did put on the show for the people because they were forced to do so. It's a fallacy to say, well, nothing happened to you, therefore everything you say is bullshit. If you're a secret organization, and not even a secret organization, if you have plans and they're nefarious as fuck and someone exposes you, acting upon that exposition will almost concretely confirm what the person has been saying. Not acting on it means nothing happens.
Financial systems, particularly when it comes to the CBDC.
You can't say
and
that,
other-
Massey. With the ability for people to self-publish these days, and the amount of publishing houses that aren't controlled, because you have to understand that we still have at least a modicum of freedom insofar as if you want to publish a book, you can publish a book, right? They can't stop everyone from not showing the book. They're not there yet. And also, that's how things will eventually get leaked. Because think about this very normally. A publishing house steps out and says, right, we're going to publish one country under blackmail, right? We're going to publish this book. Suddenly, some guys from the fucking government walk in and say, no, you're not allowed to publish that book. That book is treason. Do you, how are you going to convince everyone that works at that publisher that they should keep quiet and just accept the fact that that book may not be published? It's not possible. Someone in that publishing house will speak out. Someone will be like, this is weird. The government literally just walked in and told us we're not allowed to publish this. There's too many people in the chain. You can't kill all of them because that's going to throw a lot of suspicion on it as well. You can't really stop it. So the best way to handle it is just keep quiet and hope that people are so far up their own ass that they just don't believe it in the first place. Pat, how you doing, fam?
Things. And I think it's instructive as a means of understanding how.
And I don't judge people for that, just to be clear. I don't judge people for not wanting to believe shit like this. Because believing shit like this trashes your entire existence. Everything that you've believed is a lie. Everything that you've known your entire life to believe, and everything that you've known to be true, starts coming crashing down around you. Looking at that life, realizing that the institutions that you believe keep you safe are actually the institutions you need to be kept safe from, becomes very dangerous. It becomes a very difficult life. It's why I don't judge people that think politically for the fact that they think politically. When I hear a conservative speak basically as if they're on Fox News, or I hear a Democrat speak basically as if they're a correspondent for CNN, I don't judge them for it. Because everyone likes to feel safe. And if you can find some authority that tells you what you want to hear to make you feel safe, that's a good place to be. For most people, that's a good place to be. What isn't a good place to be, and I'll be honest with you, this is something that I've been struggling with for a while, because I don't fall into any of these camps, right? I'm not a Democrat, I'm not a Republican, I'm not conservative, nor am I really a liberal. I'm very sort of center of the road. So what I always find difficult is what is true. That's the thing that's the hardest for me, because I'll hear stories about, I'll hear one side of a story, and then I'll hear another side of the story, which is a completely different side. The facts are spun in such a way that none of this makes sense, and I don't know what to believe, because I don't think either side is actually telling the truth. It's a dangerous thing, and it makes you feel uncomfortable. It makes you feel very uncomfortable because, well, what is this world? If there's nothing I can trust, what is this world? Like, truly. So I don't blame people for sort of choosing the easy way out and just being like, nah, fuck it, that's not true. I don't mind if you don't believe it, but then I want to see your research on it. You see, this is where my biggest issue comes in with most people that just dismiss this kind of stuff off the bat. So I guarantee there's a bunch of people sitting in this chat right now that's listened to every word that this girl has said so far, and they've gone, bullshit. That right there should tell you that you are caught in a massive confirmation bias trap. Like, you don't know what the truth is, and you will not even know what the truth is, even if it hit you in the face. You want to know why? Because the only way you can actually dismiss what she says is if you do the research yourself. So you have to read the book, and then you have to go out and follow all of her evidence. You have to go look at the evidence. You have to go corroborate the evidence. And if you then find that, no, she's actually just lying, that's a different story. Because you actually kept an open mind. You tried to figure out if what she said was true, and you found that it isn't true. Go on YouTube, make your video, and tell everyone, by the way, this girl's fucking lying. If your go-to response is, she must be lying, maybe you're the one that's wrong.
Certain things going on right now are allowed to happen. For example, the whole FTX situation with Sam Bankman-Fried, a lot of the revelations that have come out of that, particularly his White House visits, an alleged connection to suspect DNC fundraising during the last election, just echoes.
It doesn't matter if she got what she wanted, Massey. Like, dude, never mind.
So much a lot of what I talk about with Epstein in the mid 1990s, and it's just very staggering, especially when you consider that before Epstein became involved in those suspect fundraisers, he was developing massive Ponzi schemes, and then go straight from that into this world. And then you have Sam Bankman-Fried running a Ponzi scheme and then doing the same type of stuff with White House visits. And there's a lot of overlap with stuff going on with he's using one of Ghislaine Maxwell's defense attorneys. There's this weird stuff about judges censoring who paid his bail, other people that may have had access to FTX accounts. Major influential parties are having their names censored from the record with their involvement in FTX. There's obviously a bigger story there. But I just wanted to bring that up to point out that understanding how this stuff really works and how it is developed is really important to understand what's going on today, and the power plays we're seeing, and the factions that are essentially fighting over the spoils of who gets to control the new serfs of this neo-feudal system that's being erected.
Yeah, it was astounding how many parallels there were, and also just the fact that a lot of this is going underreported. And I wanted to ask you, because you talk about how in the past, powerful people were blackmailed, but today with digital surveillance and all the data that they're collecting, they're also going to be blackmailing us, right? And you kind of loop to that at the end of the book. But I wanted to just ask you for a second, because this is if you guys haven't had a chance, this is 1,000 pages and everything is sourced. There are primary records, congressional reports, news outlets that you cite. How did you conduct this research, and how did you decide to start?
Well, there you go, Massey. There's your answer.
OSF.
It's very easy. Buy the book, do the research, follow all the clues, and if you find that she's lied, I want to watch your YouTube video on it. Because I don't like being lied to, just to be fair. I don't like being lied to, right? Which is why I want to read her book. Because by reading her book, I'll be able to figure out whether or not I believe any of this. And it wouldn't be difficult. If you have your sources in the book, as she says, she has sources for everything. She shows you the newspapers. Well, then I can just Google newspaper, that date, that time. Let's fucking see, right? Let's see. And if I read that and I don't see the same thing. So Doc Savage, the thing with questionable conclusions, right? If it happens once, you could maybe argue, that's weird. Let's leave it at that. If it happens twice, you have to start thinking, okay, there's a fucking pattern emerging here. If it happens 3 times, there's a conspiracy. Something must be going on, which is, I think, why this girl went back all the way to 1920, right? Because basically what she shows in the book, this was in the first part, so you kind of have to watch part 1 of this interview in order to understand what we're actually watching right now. But she goes to show you how the same things happen over and over and over and over again. The same questionable things. People will be caught red-handed and then get off on technicalities that make no fucking sense. People will go to court and then the case just quietly gets dismissed out of nowhere, or it gets mishandled, or someone dies, just mysteriously just dies, or people change their mind 180 on something literally from one day to the next. And it constantly seems to happen when these people are involved in things. So she shows you enough pieces of evidence within the book that eventually the evidence becomes overwhelming. And you start to realize that, wait, this can't happen that often without it being at least to some extent controlled by something. Something has to be going on here.
Yes.
Okay, so the reason the book starts where it is because this was the book was always sort of intended to be an extension of a series I did back when I worked at Mint Press News that was 4 parts. And it was about the Epstein scandal, but about the context sort of before it, how sexual blackmail stuff had happened before, the allegations of that ties to intelligence, what have you. And so I wrote, 2 articles on that pre-Epstein context, and 3 and 4 were on aspects that were underreported of the Epstein situation. So that's why, it ended up being sort of structured like that, and why volume 1 is sort of like a massive expansion of the first 2 articles of that series, which is the pre-Epstein context, and then 3 and 4 also a massive expansion into what becomes volume 2, the Epstein focused aspect of the book. So, and going back and looking at my original series, some of it, could have been better. I'm not, this was a couple of years ago, and I really wanted to in this work make it stand the test of time, and I wanted to make sure my sourcing was really good, because
It's incredible.
in this line of work you tend to get attacked a lot for things, and so most of the attacks I get tend to be either ad hominem or allegations that have never been, there's no evidence for it. It's just they're saying, smear stuff. Very few people willing to argue with me about end notes or engage with the actual research and try and say it's false. But I wanted to, try and hedge any sort of criticism, because I think the narrative here that I'm trying to show in my thesis, I think it's all very important and very pertinent, and really ultimately what I want
What
people to
delayed
do is
taste?
engage with the information
Caliph?
more. Of taking my word for it, I would really like it if people engaged more with the information. I actually did a video today, recorded it today, about someone who claimed that I didn't appropriately source my claims about J. Edgar Hoover, the former FBI director, and sex blackmail and all of that, and went over all of my sourcing and all of that. Definitely a much better attack on the book than I normally get, which is just ad hominem stuff, like I said. But it's I'm very confident in the sourcing of the material of this book. And
Well,
I just
can you shed any light on how you actually do this type of research and find these sources and records? Because that's what I found to be so impressive is, I mean, you have probably thousands of names in here and their companies who ran them, and the next person that they're linked to, it almost reads like an encyclopedia at some parts, because it's just name after name after company all tied together with these links that no one might expect unless you really dig into the paper trail.
Right. So, a good part of volume 1, I had a research assistant named Edmund Berger, who is amazing and a total genius. So he did some of some of the research for aspects of that book. So I can't speak to how he conducted his research, but it's brilliant. For me, it really depends on the part of the book. But a lot of stuff like Senate records and congressional records, all that stuff, are available online. Different things you can find different archived papers of different prominent people, companies they were connected to, organizations they were affiliated with, and get like directors lists and all of that stuff. And then there's also like newspaper databases, like newspapers.com. You can put in a name and search, and you'll get like 20 years worth of newspapers, local newspapers in the US and elsewhere. There's all these different resources for finding these kinds of things. But some, like other more specific stuff, like in writing about, for example, Southern Air Transport's relocation for the benefit of Leslie Wexner's The Limited, and things like that. I had to go in the
Hudson
archives
Draw, how you
of
doing, fam?
the Columbus local newspaper. For some reason I'm blanking on its name right now, sorry, but that's not available in most newspaper archives. You have to go specifically in their archives, pay for access, and you have to sort of dig through all of those at the time you have purchased your access to their archive. It
Yeah.
was actually quite expensive, considering it's like a relative,
Mhm.
the local paper for Columbus, Ohio. So it's kind of, sometimes it's specific to the topic, sometimes it's not. But I don't know if that really answers
Yeah. No,
answers
it's
your question or not.
yeah, like I said, it was super impressive data distribution. Okay, so why did you decide to start in the 1940s with this OSS, the Office of Strategic Services, which was obviously an intelligence agency, and
Nerdy
maybe we
Jessica, how
can
you
get
doing?
into a little bit of. I was fascinated by the fact that Roy Cohn, a name that is in the headlines, well, it was, at least recently when Trump was in office, the ties between intelligence, the president's office, J. Edgar Hoover, these parties held at the Plaza Hotel involving sexual blackmail. What can you share about sort of the beginning of the book?
Okay, so the reason it starts with the OSS is because I felt like it was a good point in talking about the merging of organized crime and intelligence. That a decent starting point would be something called Operation Underworld, and I think we talked about this in our last talk. So I'm not going to go too much in detail, but basically it was during World War II. It was justified out of wartime necessity. The OSS and the ONI, the Office of Naval Intelligence, collaborated with organized crime figures in order to gather intelligence on New York docks. And of course, this cooperation between the nascent national security state and this particular faction of organized crime, which, circuit was around Mayor Lansky and Lucky Luciano, who together created what they referred to as the National Crime Syndicate. These particular interests deepened their cooperation. And so, throughout the 50s and 60s, for example, there's documented CIA operations, including like assassination operations, where most of the
Astron, how you doing, bro? We're talking about One Nation Under Blackmail, or at least the author of One Nation Under Blackmail. Massey, I have not talked about the Capitol riots in Brazil, but I understand that it's going on, and I also kind of have an idea of why. A lot of people are currently rioting like fucking crazy in Brazil. I know it has to do with the president. A lot of people in Brazil isn't happy that he is the president, considering the fact that he was not the favorite to win. And that there's definitely questions that's been raised about America's involvement in the election in Brazil. It was my understanding that the guy that was favored to win had a very close relationship to China, specifically to China. And the guy who won is a lot more pro-American than he is pro-China. And so for a lot of people, there's a lot of anger right now in Brazil, at least, because they feel like their election may have been stolen. Which I don't know. I don't know if I believe that. It's entirely possible, obviously. I do not believe that America's hands are clean when it comes to other countries' elections. I don't think so. With the CIA and the stuff that the CIA does, I will not be surprised if America has influenced many an election, specifically in South America, considering, well, it's very close to America, so America would really want very specific people in charge. So yeah, but I don't know too much about it. I just sort of know the broad strokes of conspiracy theory around why people are rioting right now, but that's about it.
assassins were mob guys, or you see people, OSS veterans like Paul Hellawell and Castle Bank sort of merging with different actors in corporate and political power, and how that sort of develops, and how the offshore banking system develops, and how that involves a lot of these OSS veterans or active CIA people. And the OSS is the precursor to the CIA. And you see how that sort of develops in the Caribbean, creating like this offshore banking system that intimately involves organized crime, which of course for a long time had been very active in the Caribbean because of casino interests or other interests. To their different rackets and businesses, because essentially a lot of people think of organized crime in terms of how Hollywood has conditioned them to think about organized crime. Ultimately, organized crime is a business, but it's a business that operates essentially outside the law, and intelligence agencies also tend to operate outside the law and are, as it's very clear in the United States, not accountable to the law like regular people are, and it can essentially do as they please. And so it's not really that much of a coincidence that you see these two worlds merge, even less so when you consider, as I note in the book, that the origins of the OSS and the CIA, a lot of the top people from the earliest time were very much connected with American oligarchy, very powerful families, the Morgan.
Can I quickly do a bit of a taste here? Just in chat. How many of you not necessarily believe what this girl is saying, but sort of think, you know what, maybe there's truth to it? Even if you don't wholesale believe it, you do have an inkling to go, she might be correct. This might be happening. And how many of you obviously think, nah, bullshit. It's just complete nonsense? Absolutely believe it. I like that there's so many people that buy this wholesale, because I'm one of you. And there's a reason why I believe it's true. And we can sort of work through this logically. We can break this down very logically. We all know the saying, right? Power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts absolutely, right? We all know that saying exists, and we also know why it exists. Powerful people, specifically bad powerful people, want power. They want more control, more power, and more freedom to exact their power. Now, when you have organizations like the FBI, like the CIA, that can operate entirely outside of the law, they're not in the law, they're not part of the law, they're above the law. And by necessity, if you're a spy organization, you kind of, lowercase, how you doing, bro? Thanks for the follow, really appreciate that. If you're a spy, you're automatically not operating within the law, because spying is a crime. You're not actually allowed to do so. But also sometimes in order to do the things that you need to do, you have to break the law in order to do those things, right? Very happy to have you here, lowercase. Why would organized criminals or criminals not be attracted to an organization that by its very nature exists outside of the law? You have to just think about this logically. Let's imagine that the CIA was absolutely founded on the principle of keeping America safe and, making sure that America is the greatest country on earth and remains that way. So let's just imagine that that's how it started. Why would criminals not infiltrate it? I mean, it's the perfect organization if you're a criminal. Because not only does it expand your criminal empire by multitudes, but you can also not be caught, because everything you do there, you do under the veil of counterintelligence. So if you do bribe a couple of people, well, that was counterintelligence. If you do traffic a bunch of drugs, well, that was counterintelligence. Right? because we know that they do that. We know that there are CIA operations that actively teleport or transport drugs, right? Because they're trying to catch the criminals. Only the criminals that... So imagine this, right? You have a CIA organization or operation that is trafficking drugs between different countries under the veil of wanting to catch the criminals. But what if the criminals that they catch aren't so much criminals as they are competition? So in other words, they are sort of infiltrating the underworld, but not to stop drug trafficking, but at the behest of some more powerful person, they are shutting down the competition to ensure that there is only one player in town that does most of the trafficking, so to speak. How can you say that that is absolutely not possible? I'm not saying that it is happening. I'm saying the fact that you can very easily see why, for a criminal, the CIA would be a good bet suggests that you should at least be worried that it could be a good bet. I want to go pee quickly, so I'm going to play an ad, and then I'll be back. So give me about, like, a minute. Not even. But I need to pee. So I'll be right back. All right. Back, boys. You also have the who you know helps you get what you want. Need a good job, know someone in there. You're better off getting it. True. That is very true, Fox.
The Mellons, the Rockefellers, and so on. You see them very much involved with the creation of this intelligence apparatus from the beginning. Even the Rockefellers themselves have their own private intelligence apparatus during the war and stuff. So the world of intelligence in the United States has never, it has always been connected with oligarch interests of some capacity. So you're seeing, you know, their business interests get intertwined with organized crime interests and all of that. And it basically becomes a way for both, you know, organized crime to expand their power and wealth, intelligence agencies to expand their power, and of course for some of their members wealth as well, and then the oligarchs you know, expanding their wealth and power. I mean, that's essentially what it's all about at the end of the day.
See, and I think to be fair, you know, to give this guys a good faith defense here, I think most of this started with good intentions. You know, the intelligence organizations, in order to get more intelligence, was forced to work with organized crime because that's where you want the intelligence. So sometimes you have to choose what can be called the lesser of two evils. But the one will almost indefinitely or almost inevitably influence the other. And the problem with corruption is it almost always works harder than good, right? Almost always works harder than good. Like you have the CIA that really wants to keep people safe, and that's really all they care about. They want to keep drugs out of America, guns out of America, and all the rest of it. The criminals will work harder than the good people in order to infiltrate and ensure that their interests are put first. And they're usually willing to work a lot harder to do it. And all you need usually is like one bad apple spoils the bunch, right? Basically, that is exactly it. It usually just takes one person of questionable morals to effectively turn an entire organization into a cesspool. Why would anyone think that that is not currently what is happening?
I guess enough about that, and I'll go to the Hoover situation. So the allegation is that J. Edgar Hoover, well, we know what we do 100% definitely know. J. Edgar Hoover had a very suspect relationship with two organized crime connected individuals, Louis Rosenstiel
Mhm.
and Roy Cohn. So during the early 1950s, or much of the 1950s, Roy Cohn was legal counsel to Joseph McCarthy as part of the McCarthy hearings. Louis Rosenstiel is like a liquor baron. He's the head of Shenley Industries, which is created after Prohibition ends in the U.S., and he rises sort of to the top of the North American liquor market. He has a long-standing relationship with the Bronfmans, who become basically the liquor barons of Canada. But it's a very complex and later acrimonious relationship between Bronfman and Rosenstiel. But they share a lot of the same organized crime connections, which of course were forged during the bootlegging period of
Mhm.
Prohibition, which set up these guys ready to go as soon as Prohibition ended, right? So Louis Rosenstiel was well known at his workplace to be bisexual. He was referred to jokingly by employees as Rosie. And so it would make sense too that if it's so commonly known around the workplace, it likely was as
Oh, that's the. He's rosy. He's not entirely gay, but he's rosy. I like that. That's pretty cool.
well as in his social circles. Possibly less known is that Louis Rosenstiel bugged his factory to compromise workers, catching snippets of conversations and using it against him. They're, of course, being recorded without their knowledge, and also doing the same for parties he hosted at his home. He has a very odd relationship with Roy Cohn, described as a father figure to Roy Cohn. As I talk about in chapter 4 of the book, Roy Cohn's upbringing is very complicated, sort of a lack of a father figure there and a very overbearing mother. But you have Roy Cohn being affiliated from a very early.
Does that not just look like a mobster to you, though? Like, if you were to imagine a mobster, that's what you would imagine, no?
Age with organized crime affiliates and organized crime interests through his own family and through his best friends throughout his childhood and their families, and later ascends rather rapidly through the Justice Department
But I
ranks,
mean, no.
becoming, being a U.S. Working for the Justice Department pretty much straight out of law school, and then becoming chief counsel to McCarthy, beating out Robert F. Kennedy for that position. And of course, Hoover and Cohn both hated the crud out of Bobby Kennedy, among other things that I do sort of go into in the book. But Hoover enters the picture in a way that doesn't make a lot of sense. For example, Nicholas von Hoffman, who's probably one of Roy Cohn's best known biographers, was writing in the mid, I think in 87 or so, his book Citizen Cohn, and he doesn't, to him, Roy's account of how he officially met Hoover for the first time makes no sense. And the only way it can make sense is if they had met previously. And that's where this whole Plaza Hotel thing comes in. So basically, this allegation was first reported by Anthony Summers, who's an Irish journalist formerly with the BBC. He wrote a book called Official and Confidential in the early 90s. And in that book, he cites Louis Rosenstiel's fourth wife, Susan Kaufman. Yeah, and Susan Kaufman talks a lot about this, how she was taken to basically sex blackmail parties at the Plaza Hotel by her husband, Louis Rosenstiel. Hoover was there and Roy Cohn was there. And
The New York
goes
Cardinal was there.
This is, by the way, how I think they get a lot of these people, because I don't think the majority of politicians and sort of public servants and things, I don't think the majority of them are evil. I think the way they get got is through Jeffrey Epstein, for example. He has this entire quote unquote love island, right? Where they have all of these massive parties, and we know that Bill Gates was on his jet and probably on the island as well a couple of times. We know Trump was a good friend of Jeffrey Epstein as well, at least during his formative years. Although later it becomes a little muddy as to whether or not they maintained their friendship. But so imagine you're at this party, right? Obviously, you're at this party with what can be considered as an incredibly stand-up gentleman, Jeffrey Epstein. He's friends with all of your friends in Washington. He has all of these business connections. He's a very wealthy guy. So clearly, there's no reason to distrust this guy. There's a bunch of girls at this party, and maybe you step out a little and you fucky. And then the next morning, you wake up and you're informed that the girl that you just had sex with is underage. And that they have evidence of you sleeping with this girl. And unless you want this evidence to be made public, you'll do as they say, right? And maybe it starts small. They first start you for a few favors. Like they ask you to not prosecute someone, or maybe prosecute someone. It's small stuff. And it grows over time because obviously they have you in the first one, because that's usually just on the base of it. That's how blackmail works. So effectively what you want to do is you want to catch the person in a situation that they really can't get out of, unless, of course, they destroy their own careers. Most people will then choose their own career. Now you want to entrap them into increasingly worse and worse things. Because here's the thing. If you slept with a girl, right, on an island that you didn't know was underage, so you two had sex and you had no idea, there's a very good chance that nothing is really going to happen to you, right? If you're a politician, you're probably going to have to vacate office. You're probably going to have to step down because you're most likely married, and that means you've cheated on your wife, and it just makes it worse that you've slept with an underage girl. But if you can reasonably claim that you had no reason to believe that this girl was underage because she was at a party and, she was there with a bunch of other adults, and you had no idea that this girl was underage, I don't know if you'll be convicted. Maybe you will, but I don't think you will. And also, the person whose party this is, Jeffrey Epstein, is probably going to be in a hell of a lot more problems than what you are in, right? And so what ends up happening is you're afraid of being caught, right? And so you do what they say. But now they have you for two things. The one is the underage thing, but you've just done something for them that they can use against you again. And then they'll get you for more things. And before you know it, you're so deep into it that if you were to come out, you will absolutely also go to jail. So the stakes just keep building. And I think that's how they get most of these people to basically fuck themselves, right? That's how they get most of these people on their side. And that's where Jeffrey Epstein was, I think, fundamental in it. Big Man and Slapper, how you doing, fam?
I mean,
Yeah,
Catholic
Cardinal Spellman, whose secret sex life is now very well known. But talking about that at the time, I mean, you were just laughed at because they had very powerful positions. But now you have even mainstream media acknowledging that Cardinal Spellman was engaged in that type of activity. It's of course known with Roy Cohn as well.
He was a raging homosexual. That's what he was. But at the time, you weren't allowed to be a raging homosexual. And so he had to hide it. Bro, that must have been wild times, right? You just imagine that. Like, you're not allowed to be a raging homosexual. You should be straight. Like, how fucked up would that be? Imagine tomorrow, right? If we weren't allowed to be straight. Like, how would that life be? Like, imagine tomorrow it becomes a thing where people seriously judge people that are straight, and it's considered disgusting and horrible and a crime and whatnot, because there was actually a time where it was a crime. How hard would it be for you to actually live your life that way? Like, you have to have a husband, and you have to suck dick at least a couple of times a year in order to uphold appearances, even though you don't really want to do that. That shit's wild, bro.
period it wasn't, but once he died from AIDS, you know, it was obviously an open secret that he was, you know, engaged in that type of those type of activities in his intimate life. And then Hoover, you know, you have later on after Anthony Summers come out, you have, you know, it essentially becomes an admitted secret or open secret out in Washington. You have Bill Clinton at some point making a joke about it's going to be hard to fill J. Edgar Hoover's pumps like high heels, a reference to the claim that J. Edgar Hoover occasionally cross-dressed and stuff.
Jesus.
And you know,
Oh,
some people don't
shit.
really like these claims, I guess, because they have this idea of who Hoover was supposed to be. But you know, it's very complicated. So anyway, it's
The
Susan
man
Kaufman is
had
not the only
a
source
secret
of that.
life.
There was also a New York attorney named John Klotz that used declassified New York government files, and also a private investigator to uncover, completely unrelated to Susan Kaufman, additional corroboration of there being this so-called blue suite in the Plaza Hotel that was being used for blackmail, basically a pedophile protection racket, as described by this New York attorney, and that it was involving, you know, these
Jesus.
prominent individuals. So you have those allegations, and then the third corroborating source is former head of the Vice Squad at NYPD, James Rothstein. He claims that he had a sit down, he and his partner had a sit down interview with Roy Cohn in the 1980s, that Roy Cohn admitted he was involved in sexual blackmail, running uh, little boys, underage boys, for the purpose of these activities, and basically to entrap powerful people to ensure they would
Fuck.
go along with the plan, whatever that means. And
Astro One, because a normal homosexual, right, will be just a homosexual, right? Will suck dick rather than not suck dick, right? But a raging homosexual will suck many dicks. Also, it's more comedic when you say raging homosexual. It's basically for comedy, but yeah. I mean, it used to be, I think, a thing back when it was still an insult. Like back when people didn't want to be seen as gay, it was sort of like an insult, I think, right? Where people would be like, "Oh yeah, he's a raging homosexual," which I think actually just implied that he's so gay that he can't really hide it. I don't think it necessarily meant anything about like the type of lifestyle that they chose, but rather just, you know, it's clear as fucking day, right? The same with the word flaming. Right? That used to be another sort of innuendo, or another like secret word in order to describe people that were gay. You're flaming. In other words, you're very gay. Yeah, like a raging pussy hound or whatever would be probably similar for the straight experience.
James Rothstein made this this claim first in the early 90s to John DeCamp. He made it subsequently to another guy in the earlier 2000s, and I interviewed him myself in
Pretty
2020.
much.
He made the same claims, and so, you know, that's three different sources corroborating that there was some sort of sexual blackmail activity going on there in the Plaza Hotel. In addition to that, you have Hoover being according to the New York Post, involved with the ringleader of another extortion ring around the same time. Well, it was busted about a decade later, after this Plaza. Susan Kaufman attended these Plaza Hotel soirees, or whatever you want to call them, and it was called the Chicken and Bowls extortion ring. You can find remnants of it in the New York Times archive. Even Slate.com at one point published a long form piece about this particular extortion ring. And again, as I mentioned earlier, the New York Post reported that the ringleader of the ring, a guy named Sherman Kaminsky, was in photos with Hoover. The FBI becomes involved in the investigation of this ring after it's busted, and Hoover's pictures, of course, disappear from the file. And, you know, that's that. And somehow Sherman Kaminsky is able to escape from the New York courthouse during his sentencing hearing, and he isn't found for 11 years. So I would like someone to explain to me how you're able to escape your sentencing hearing from a busy courthouse in Manhattan,
Wow.
you know, and then
Well,
not be found. It's pretty impressive. So,
Yeah.
you know, that's J.
Man
Edgar
had
Hoover
skills.
tied up with 2 sexual blackmail operations, allegedly with different sources. You know, there's a decent amount of evidence there. And then to add the cherry on top, you have the FBI and Hoover and Cohn being involved in some way with the Profumo affair, which brought down the conservative government of Harold Macmillan in Britain in I guess the early 60s. And there was an attempt to blackmail John F. Kennedy as part of
That's
that. One of the
interesting,
girls that was
actually.
used as part of this blackmail
I
ring
don't
named
know that.
Mariella Novotny was brought to the United States, and she was arrested as was her apparent handler, a British guy named Harry Allen Tower.
Oh, shit.
And she left
Moni, 22 months, part of the DJ Nation. Appreciate you, fam. Thank you, thank you, thank you. How you doing, Moni?
her client list with the FBI, and for mysterious reasons, the FBI destroyed it and didn't pursue charges against her. So when you look at the same nexus responsible for the Profumo affair as I do in the book, you find people like Thomas Corbally, a private detective tied to organized crime, also U.S. intelligence, and he's involved in Britain with these weird sex blackmail parties. Corbally later get involved with Heidi Fleiss, the Hollywood madam, after all of this with the Profumo affair plays out. But it's,
Wow.
there's a lot of patterns here, and it's very hard when you put all of this together to say, oh, this is just coincidence, which is
Right.
what a lot of people like to do, and say that there's no evidence of conspiracy or
Mhm.
anything there. This is all just a coincidence. But when you put it the way I try and put it in the book, it makes it very difficult to argue that it's a coincidence, especially with what we know about J. Edgar Hoover and his use of blackmail, that he had these files on people in
Right.
his office, friend and foe alike, and would weaponize that as he saw fit. And he wasn't the only one that did this. This was also commonly used by people at the top of the CIA, like James Jesus
Mhm.
Angleton. And you have a lot of power struggles between the CIA and the FBI. And they're like,
Uh-huh.
warring with each other over who gets to control what and who's more powerful in the national security state and who
Yeah, of
and all of that
course.
stuff. It's again fighting over money and power at the end of the day. But you have all this factional infighting, and I mean, unfortunately, we've been sort of spoon fed this narrative about American history that it's been a certain way, but in
Mhm.
reality it's just been totally nuts, with a bunch of really awful people on both sides, duking it out for who gets to be on, top dog, essentially.
She just said something there that I really hope that a lot of Americans will wake up to. This idea that you still have a choice as to who runs your country. This idea that people thought to themselves, oh, I get to choose between Donald Trump and Biden, and one is for me, the other is against me. Or this idea that in 2024, you're going to be able to choose between Biden and whoever the else fuck runs, and you're going to think that this one is for you and the other one is against you. I don't think that that is even remotely true. I do think that as things stand right now, the Republican Party is probably the one party that has the most infighting. So if you look at the Republican Party, the way that the Republican Party is set up, it's sort of democratic from the ground up, right? So people vote who they think should run in the primaries and who they think should ultimately become the president. It's all done by the people. It's not super PACs and stuff like that. It's just general members of the party that get to vote. If you join the party, you get to vote in the primaries. Simple as that. There's no super PACs and sort of super people in there, right? And if you look at the Republican Party, you have a guaranteed, like a very clear group within the Republican Party that doesn't get along with the other group. So you have these group of senators and these groups of congressmen that hate Mitch McConnell, and they're constantly fighting. Just look at what's this fuck's name that just had to, like, he set records for the amount of time that they had to revote. Was it McCarthy? Something McCarthy? Like Kevin McCarthy, I think. That he just couldn't win the vote because there's this group of Republicans that just will not fucking vote for him no matter what. And I think the Republican Party is sort of the group that is part of the uniparty of America. I think it's the largest. So people that think the Republican Party is sort of the good party, no. 80 to 90% of everyone that is part of the Republican Party is part of the establishment, they hate you as an ordinary American. They're there to make money for them and their friends. They don't give a shit about you. But because the Republican Party is a little bit more democratic in the sense of how leaders are chosen, they have to put up with these sort of elements within it. The Democratic Party, on the other hand, seems to get rid of anyone that pulls to the side. So as soon as you have someone that doesn't sort of fit the bill of what the Democrats want, they get worked out very quickly. They don't get to be part of it. I'm not saying this to shit on Democrats or Republicans. I'm saying you are both getting shat on by your own parties. This is not if you're a Republican, you're better than the Democrats, or if you're a Democrat, you're better than the Republicans. I'm trying to explain to you that I think you're being fucked no matter who you vote for. I don't think you have a choice. I don't think you actually get to vote for who rules your country. Because I think the people who actually rule the country are not elected. I don't think you can vote for those people. It appears at least that we have two different Republican parties, one that is being referred to as the Freedom Caucus, and then we have the globalist neocons, but I don't really think either of them really gives a shit about us little people. Oh, Peter Lee, no. I never said that the Freedom Caucus gives a fuck about the little people. I think the Freedom Caucus have different rich friends. Like, let me just be clear about this. I don't think the Freedom Caucus gives a shit about you or me or anyone else. I think the sort of turtle boy side of Republicans, right? They have like very rich friends on Wall Street and very rich friends in this and that and in the military and shit like that. And then the Freedom Caucus have very rich friends in another part of America, right? Different businesses. And I think that's why the fight is happening. I don't think anyone gives a shit about fighting for us. Like, let me just be very clear on that. I would say, with the exception of perhaps one person in the entire US government that I'm not 100%, I'm going to say I'm about 51, maybe 52% certain of this, maybe even less than that. But I think in the entire American government, there's one person that I think, whether he's right or wrong on a lot of things, I do think that he does have the American public in mind, at least. And that would be Paul. Is it Senator Ron Paul, I think? Or is it? No, it's not Ron. Ron is his father, right? Rand Paul. That's the one. I would say that's probably the only guy but I think he's hated by everyone. I think the Freedom guys hate him. I think the other side hates him because he seems to be the one guy that doesn't want to play by anyone's rules. He has this libertarian streak, and obviously they fucking hate that, but I could be so wrong. It could turn out that no, he's just as bad as the rest of them. He just happens to act better. That's the problem with politicians. You never fucking know, right? You never know who you can trust because they all seem to be very bad. DeSantis seems good right now, but remember, DeSantis doesn't have a national office. The second DeSantis gets into national office, because that's where things happen. I don't think this corruption and evil exists at a local level. Some are corrupt and evil, but I think at a local level, it's a lot harder, right? Because people in their state pretty much know when their state is shit, right? And you're not going to keep voting for someone that makes your state more and more shit. So there's a lot more control, I think, the people have over their state senators and their state governors and things like that. I think the problem comes in as soon as those people move to the national stage. That's when they show their real colors. That's when you really find out just how bad these people are. And that's true for Republicans and Democrats, in my opinion.
And the American people and of course people elsewhere who are the victims of pointless imperial wars are the people who suffer for it.
Yeah, you know, I didn't realize that so many of our former presidents have, you know, former jobs in intelligence agencies, and then names do keep coming up. Like Roy Cohn comes up when you talk about the Reagan era, and then he had
Oh
a
yeah,
relationship with
Yeah, of
Trump. He was the
course.
mentor to Trump, right?
it's Trump's mentor. Yeah.
Yeah, so okay, let's talk about some of these because I know there's so much to cover and
Yeah,
I
of
want to be
course.
respectful of your time, but I wanted to ask you about the 1929 crash very quickly, only because you touch on it briefly. It was obviously before when OSS started, but are there any parallels? Because we've seen decades of, you know, bubbles popping up, and then at the end of the day, they make the rich richer, the poor poorer. Is there anything that we can draw from what you learned about the 1929 crash and the people involved in the elite circle then that we can compare to today?
Okay, so the 1929 crash, I didn't really talk about so much in the book. I think the only place where I talk about it is when I'm talking about the collapse of a banking institution that was called the Bank of the United States. And
Yes.
this was being run by Roy Cohn's the maternal side of his family, the Marcus family, and specifically his uncle Bernie, Bernard Marcus, was in charge of the bank at the time it failed. And you know, basically what he was
Dude, only in government can one fail upwards. Only in government. Have you ever seen anything like that? Someone will have just the most horrendous, rancid fucking job, right? They'll do the worst job imaginable, and then they fail at it, and somehow they get a better job next time. Like, how the fuck is this possible?
doing was trying to bide time, but the bank was insolvent. There was obviously a lot of fraud. And they had specifically, that particular bank had been controversial from the time it had been created, you know, a couple decades before the crash, because they called it the Bank of the United States, trying to make it sound like it was like a federally linked institution, when in fact it
Jesus,
was
yeah, of
not.
course.
And it advertised exclusively in immigrant communities, specifically immigrant Jewish communities, and that was most of the people that put money into the bank. And then the Marcus family, who were Jewish themselves, basically stole from their kin. And well, at least, you know, the allegate we don't really know if Bernard Marcus took over from his father, who would be Roy Cohn's grandfather. And it's not obviously Bernard Marcus engaged in major fraud, which was caught at the time that the bank imploded, because they were going to merge with another bank, and then the bank they were going to merge with looked at the books and like freaked out, and then they tried to stall, you know, for all this time, and then it all came you know, tumbling down. And what's interesting though is that the Marcus family, claimed it was anti-Semitism, which is why the bank was allowed to fail. But actually, it had been rescued previously. Like, people tried to raise alarms in the 26 or something that the bank was insolvent and engaged in a lot of suspect activity. And the judge basically, like, you know, dismissed the case. And as I note in the book, the judge had some connections to a lot of these same networks that Roy Cohn's.
Dude, Big Melon Slapper, you know what pisses me off about all of this? I think the thing that pisses me off most about this, you have people in government, right, that will take the knee. They'll speak about how they care about black people, how they care about Jewish people, how they care about minorities and gay people and people of the LGBT. They'll say all the shit, right? And they'll talk a good game. But then when you get down to the brass tacks, so you get down to the policies that they pass, the companies that they advance, you realize that the victims of almost all of this are the very people that they claim to be protecting. Like, the very people that they claim they're trying to help and that they care about are the people that pay the ultimate price for this. And that, I think, pisses me off more. It's one thing if you're just a liar, right? And you just say shit because who gives a crap, right? You just want power. I find it infinitely worse when you shit on people that is already down on their luck. You know, you already have immigrants that is struggling. You already have black people that is struggling. You already have people part of the LGBT that is struggling. And then you shit on them a little bit more. Why? Because they don't have the ability to really fight back. Like, what the fuck are they going to do to you? Right? That, I think, pisses me off infinitely more. And what's worse is that most of these groups don't realize that they're being used.
family was affiliated with, and nothing was done, and then all this fraud basically exploded afterwards. People lost loads of money, and it was one of the worst bank runs in American history.
Right.
But
I mean, it's crazy.
anti-Semitism
There are so
was
many
not the
parallels.
reason.
It's time for a quick break to hear these messages from my partners. First up, iTrust Capital. iTrust Capital lets you invest in Bitcoin for your retirement with the tax benefits of an
Please do not invest in Bitcoin for your retirement. This shit is going to get shut down by the government 100%. As I said at the start of the video, the Bitcoin guys that believe themselves to be above the government, that believes that they are sticking it to the government, all it takes, and this genuinely, all it fucking takes, right? Ballistic, take care of yourself, fam. Really, really happy to have you hang out. Take care of yourself, bro. It's for the government to make it illegal. That's it. The second the government makes owning Bitcoin illegal, Bitcoin dies. How are you going to get hold of it? Because the banks can block it. It happened in South Africa. Like, for a time, you could physically not make purchases on Amazon from South Africa right in the beginning. The banks would just block you. If you tried to spend money, it would block you. You just literally couldn't fucking get a purchase through. The banks would just go, no, you're not allowed to purchase from the site. Since they've relaxed and you can actually purchase from the site now, but that would be as easy as it gets. Oh, you have money, you want to buy Bitcoin on this exchange? Well, guess what? All of these exchanges are illegal now, and you're blocked from being able to buy on them. And then it's over. All of these dreams and schemes that you have of sticking it to the government is over. So please do not fall for this bullshit.
IRA. You can defer taxes on gains using a crypto IRA, or with a Roth IRA, you can withdraw
pretty much right.
tax-free at retirement.
Yeah, you can buy
And
Logan
here are
Paul's
some important things to know
crypto.
given the recent crypto
That
contagion.
shit's legit.
iTrust does not lend against client assets. iTrust accounts are also FDIC insured up to $250,000 US, and iTrust does not hold customer assets or money. Assets are actually held between Coinbase custody and a custody platform called Fireblocks. And Fireblocks, by the way, underlies pretty much the entire industry. Their multi-party computation technology is the gold standard of custody for institutions and allows for private keys to be separated, encrypted, and shared across multiple parties in cold storage. Separately, all US dollars are held within iTrust Bank, Signature Bank in New York. So if you're doing retirement planning and considering adding Bitcoin to your IRA portfolio, you can sign up for an account and get a $100 bonus at itrust.capital/Natalie
do you want to buy
All right, next
some
up,
crypto?
Bitcoin Conference 2023. This is the ultimate Bitcoin event every year, and it's going to be held once again in Miami Beach, May 18th through the 20th. Last year, there were about 30,000 attendees, and it's hard to believe the scale until you see it in person. There are incredible speaking sessions featuring the world's biggest Bitcoin voices, networking events, games, parties, and of course, Soundfest. I actually credit my career transition to the Bitcoin conference because I went for the first time in 2021, and that's where I dropped my first episodes of Coin Stories, not expecting this to become my full-time job at all, but just hoping to meet Bitcoiners and find more.
Bro, it is such a fucking... It's effectively a Ponzi scheme because all you have is the greater fool's theory at work. That's all it is. It doesn't work as money. It can never work, especially the fuckers who's like Bitcoin only. Like the people that believe that Bitcoin and Bitcoin alone is the future. Here's why you're a moron. There's a literal cap on Bitcoin, right? There's literally only so much Bitcoin that will ever exist. By definition, that means it can never be used as money. Because what happens if you don't have Bitcoin? What the fuck do you do then? You're fucked. You can just never buy anything because congratulations, there's no more Bitcoin left. And the people that hold it right now, they're saving it, right? They're saving up for a boat or whatever. So good luck in trying to get it. By its very design, it cannot be used as money. Just cannot. It will never work. It's wild to me, the amount of people that never think through any of this shit. It's just weird.
Guests for the show. I actually went up to people like Michael Saylor backstage with a business card, and that's how I got him to come on the show. So anything can happen there, especially if you dream of working in the industry. Ticket prices go up every month until May, so don't miss out. And for 10%
Maybe
off,
I should go work
use
in
the
the
code
industry.
HODL
What do you guys think? I'll be rich.
t.tc/conference. I'll see you there. There are
That
so
was
many
not the
parallels.
reason. Yeah, yeah.
Well, talking about banks, one of the ones that you focus on a lot in both volumes is the BCCI, that it was so extremely powerful, penetrated the US financial system. It helped facilitate so many scandals. And
I think I'm gonna call it True Money. I like the inherent misinformation in it. I kind of like that, you know, like the name itself is a lie, which makes me happy on some level. Fuck me, dude. I could be rich tomorrow. But the funny thing is, if you actually just made a crypto, and you didn't do a rug pull or anything like that, you literally just made a crypto, or a crypto coin, you could still be rich, right? Those fucks. There's so many idiots that's willing to buy crypto. All you have to do is just come up with a coin and not fuck it, right? You'll still be rich. You'll still make a shit ton of money. You don't need to rug pull. It's weird that these guys all come up with NFTs and cryptos and then they rug pull as if you need to do that in order to make money.
was involved in arms dealing and trafficking and drugs and all of it. So can you share what you want people to know and maybe what you hope to spark curiosity so that they look into it more in the book as well?
Right. So BCCI, I mostly talk about in volume 1. I think it's like chapter 7, maybe a little bit of 8, where I focus on BCCI. But basically, BCCI was nominally first a development bank. That's how it was, portrayed. But really, in my opinion, it operated more as a private intelligence apparatus. And as I note in the book, it's been alleged in numerous sources that there was intelligence agencies were responsible for the creation of the bank. So it's been, alleged for a long time that it was Pakistani intelligence, but there's a lot of indications that the CIA was also involved. Specifically Richard Helms, who's a former CIA director. And BCCI was involved in a lot of very crazy things. I mean, you can go online on archive.org, the Senate report that was, I think, written by John Kerry and another senator whose last name is Brown, wrote this report together. And, the stuff that's officially admitted by the US government about what BCCI did is totally insane. One of the most insane things, I mentioned earlier is about its involvement in sex trafficking, basically a template for what Jeffrey Epstein would later do with Ghislaine Maxwell. The founder of the bank, his last name's Abedi. I think it's Aga Hassan Abedi or something is his full name. He basically was pimping out underage kids from Pakistani villages to the elite of the United Arab Emirates and also unspecified VIPs of BCCI, whatever that means. And so basically the elite of the United Arab Emirates were being given a bunch of underage Pakistani kids that were taken by this woman associate,
what the fuck is wrong with these people?
Of Abedi, who would take them to the biggest cities in Pakistan, have them outfitted in fancy clothes, train them in sex technique. I mean, it's exactly like Ghislaine Maxwell. And then these girls would be sent over there. Some of them were prepubescent. Many of them would return with physical scars because of their interaction with these elites in the UAE. I mean, it's really sick stuff. And what kind of bank does this? This is supposed to be a bank. So again,
this collapse, it had a meltdown, not dissimilar to some of the things we're seeing now.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting about BCCI's collapse is that it happens in 1991, which is when a lot of major developments happen. You have the collapse of the Soviet Union, for example. You have the cover-up of the Promise software scandal, and also Iran-Contra happened that year. And then, of course, you have basically a cover-up of the BCCI situation. And the last, all those cover-ups were handled by the Attorney General at the time, who was William Barr.
Right.
When he was Attorney General the first time, of course, he was Attorney General under Trump more recently. But he
Mhm.
has a very long affiliation with the CIA, going back to the
Right.
70s, was involved in stonewalling the church committee, trying to investigate the CIA. He would, and then later allegedly represented himself as general counsel of Southern Air Transport under an alias during Iran-Contra and all other sorts of crazy stuff
And his dad
going
hired
on.
Epstein, right? At the Dalton?
Yes. Yes, and that was at a time when William Barr was already working for the CIA. So Donald Barr is an intelligence veteran, OSS
Mhm.
veteran. His son's working at the CIA when he hires Epstein. Yeah.
It's
When
fascinating, like, name connected to a name, connected to a name,
Well,
and
it's really
again
weird
Fuck
because
me,
Epstein
man.
was not qualified to teach even public school in New York City.
right.
So how did he get a job at the most elite, allegedly the most elite, one of the most elite, educational
Yeah, this is
institutions?
something that I heard
Uh,
actually from another source. Jeffrey Epstein is nothing, right? He's not a professor. He doesn't have a PhD. He's not supposed to be a teacher, and yet he gets hired as a fucking professor at a university. Just how? How the fuck do you get, like, if I walked into my local university now and I was like, "Hey, bro, so I thought I'd come teach for a bit," they'd laugh at me. They'd be like, "Get the fuck out! Why would we take you? You have nothing." This guy walks in off the street and just goes, "Oh yeah, by the way, I want to teach now because I have some reasons." And they're like, "Yeah, sure. Like for you, anything, fam. I wonder what you have access to at a university." Well, first and foremost, a lot of young people, right? A lot of young people, and not necessarily for exploitation, but for future sort of identification. People that could become the future of stuff, and could be helpful in the future. But also probably a lot of information on people all around, especially since this university seems to be one of the elite schools. You would obviously have information on parents within the elite that you would otherwise have a difficult time finding.
Okay,
there.
I want to touch more on Epstein and get back to also William Barr because we see so much of him even today. But can you share the backstory? Because now we're in the 90s, the backstory to Bill Clinton. I found your story so fascinating.
This is wild,
Learning about
bro.
Uncle Raymond, his own ties to intelligence, and then Hillary Clinton and her law firm. I mean, you guys will read all of this in the book, but maybe a summary of the backstory of the Clintons and how they rose to power from Arkansas. Maybe people wouldn't expect that.
Yeah, so Bill Clinton's rise is very interesting. His uncle Raymond, as you just mentioned, had apparent organized crime connections, but also, political connections within Arkansas that allowed him sort of to get a leg up. He's a Rhodes Scholar. He studies at Oxford. Rhodes Scholars, the Rhodes Scholarship and Oxford in general have a lot of intersections with intelligence. And of course, when Bill Clinton later becomes president, his administration is stuffed with other Rhodes Scholars, just like him. But he's allegedly recruited by the CIA to spy on people while he's at Oxford in relation to, I think, the anti-war movement or something along those lines. So there's a lot of, of these interest apparent very early on in the Bill Clinton story. Then, of course, with Hillary Clinton, you have her being involved in the Rhodes Law Firm, which is a long-standing law firm in Little Rock, Arkansas. But during the period where she got involved, became very much involved with the fortunes of a man named Jackson Stevens, who is a very, very powerful businessman who I guess most of his business interests are based in Arkansas, but he is much involved in a lot of stuff much bigger than Arkansas and ended up not just bankrolling a lot of the Clintons' political careers, but also Bush Sr., for example. And he had a lot of involvement with a lot of this intelligence related stuff I talk about in the book through his different companies, and a lot of his ability to use his companies for those purposes were directly facilitated by the Rose Law Firm, where you have Hillary Clinton. And in addition to her, you have other people that have prominent roles in the early Clinton administration, Webster Hubbell and Vince Foster. Webster Hubbell is forced, has to leave, of course, under a cloud of scandal, and Vince Foster dies relatively early on in the Clinton administration under very, as I note in the book, suspect circumstances. And it's not the only
Yeah.
suspect death of a top Clinton official during the Clinton presidency. So
Yeah,
I
can
don't.
you share a little bit more about Fostergate because it was sort of illustrative of what we're seeing and hearing since then. This idea of there was a fundraiser, and one of the most surprising things I read was that Hillary Clinton allegedly was selling high level nuclear code secrets to Israelis. And then there was a payoff. Vince
Yeah.
Foster's wife got like a $286,000 deposit mysteriously in her account, and he was going to meet with the president, and suddenly he's dead.
He like rejected hush money apparently, and then was gonna drop this whole mess in Bill Clinton's lap, but died beforehand. Well, that's the allegation. So this is a very complex story. So people that want the details on it, I would refer
Yeah.
you to the book because it's all out there. So basically, you have Jeffrey Epstein from 1987, possibly 1985, with some of this stuff. You know, he's in Leslie Wexner's inner circle. By the time he's affiliated with the Clintons at the beginning of their administration, he's Leslie Wexner's money manager and has almost total control over Leslie Wexner's into business entities and finances through a very far-reaching power of attorney. And but he also created a Ponzi scheme around that same time with Stephen Hoffenberg that collapses spectacularly in 1993.
Towers
Towers
Financial.
Financial, one of the biggest Ponzi schemes in U.S. history. His name is dropped from the case, and he begins. He's associated at that same time with this fundraiser at the Clinton White House that's not necessarily being run by the DNC or Bill Clinton. It's being run by the White House Historical Association and the First Lady's office, meaning Hillary Clinton. And
To redecorate, right?
allegedly to redecorate. So I might actually just refer to my book for part of this, if you don't mind, because I think
Yeah.
it gives a better idea of what we're dealing with here. Might take me a second to find it. Sorry.
So
Sure, no worries.
So
I found it to be fascinating. I was the
yeah, I mean, it's
Foster.
a really crazy story. So the New York Times reported on Vince Foster's quote unquote suicide note. So first
Right.
off, police, when they searched Foster's office after his death and his body was discovered, found nothing in his briefcase. His briefcase is empty. Then somehow 36 hours later, the First Lady's office says that this suicide note appeared, and it's Foster's. It's sometimes also referred to as Foster's quote unquote resignation letter. And what's odd about it is
that should first and foremost, who writes a suicide note and then what? Because the Clintons didn't claim, or the First Lady's office didn't claim that it was sent to them. They claimed that they had found it. Right? Why would you write a suicide note at another location as to where you plan to commit suicide? Because mostly people will write a suicide note and then they'll either have it on them or it will be on the desk close to where they committed suicide. Whereas this person seems to have... hold up, let me just quickly answer this. Hello? Never mind, fucking bot, bro. So this person has this suicide note that just shows up in the First Lady's office. And it also happens to say that the First Lady did nothing wrong in his suicide note. The First Lady did nothing wrong. How is that not suspect as fuck?
The New York Times wrote the following about it, and that's the quote I'm looking for. Yeah. So she's responsible. So basically, Hillary Clinton is the main person behind the 30-hour delay in releasing Foster's alleged suicide note to authorities. And photographing the note was forbidden. It was exempt from Freedom of Information Act requests. A copy was somehow obtained by a man named James Davidson, who arranged for 3 handwriting experts to examine the note. They judged it to be a forgery. Anyway, but Hillary Clinton's personal involvement is important because the note states that, quote, the usher's office plotted to have excessive costs incurred taking advantage of Khaki Hockersmith and HRC Hillary Rodham Clinton. So according to the New York Times, interpreting that line of the letter, it says Hillary Rodham, that the notes, this part of the note refers to, quote, Hillary Rodham Clinton's redecoration plans for the White House. And cryptically charged at the usher's office, which oversees the renovations, was using those plans against Clinton and her decorator, Khaki Hawker-Smith. And then it goes on to say, quote, Mr. Foster alluded to cost overruns and schemes associated with the redecorating, which he did not describe, but feared would embarrass the president and Mrs. Clinton. So this is the fundraiser that Ponzi schemer Jeffrey Epstein, name drop from the case, is affiliated with redecorating this. It ends up in Vince Foster's suicide note. It's the only mention of Hillary Clinton in the whole suicide note. And
So this guy writes a suicide note where he also happens to explain to the people that see the suicide note that Hillary Clinton was innocent. She did not use public funds for anything. Like, she did redecorate and it was all above board. Why? I mean, people who commit suicide, just to be clear, you're in a very dark place, in a very deep hole when you commit suicide. Would you be thinking about anyone else at that point in time? I don't fucking think so.
the New York Times says it was because of schemes associated with this, and it would have been Vince Foster's job as chief counsel to determine if there was anything suspect about the finances of that fundraiser.
So what
And
would they be
then-
raising funds for? And what was this tied to the potentially nuclear codes to the Israelis?
Right. So that's a part of something else that's, well, it's related, right? So it's
Mhm.
not necessarily tied to the fundraiser. In the same mix where you have Foster's death, you have this Fostergate story. So the top investigative reporter at Forbes in 1995 was a man named James Norman. James Norman wrote this very explosive piece that he called Fostergate. And basically the allegations of Fostergate, based on, he had a lot of different evidence backing his claims, and basically was able to confirm a lot of it, corroborate a lot of it, but he did use some anonymous intelligence sources. But again, it's a very sensitive story. So basically, the allegation is that Vince Foster had a Swiss bank account. Hillary Clinton shared that bank account with him to some extent, and that basically Hillary Clinton was selling nuclear codes and other sensitive information, most of which obtained from the NSA, to Israel, and that Israel was then sending money to the Swiss bank account of Vince Foster, and that he and Hillary Clinton were essentially partaking in that. And allegedly, the Israelis would then sell that information on to other countries like China, our ostensible adversaries. Right. So, there's a lot more detail than that in the book of,
Right.
Why this is a probable incident, and it's very alarming.
Yeah, I'd say.
Because basically you have a grave undermining of national security happening there. But it is consistent with some other things I do talk about in the book. For example, Israeli espionage targeting the US in the 1980s through either Jonathan Pollard or the Promise software scandal is very significant, involves Robert Maxwell, for example, and was
Yes.
very focused on US nuclear institutions. Then you have this fundraiser where you have Epstein and Robert Maxwell's daughter, Ghislaine Maxwell, tied up with, Hillary Clinton
Or is how so?
and Vince Foster. They're involved with this weird fundraiser that's obviously quite suspect. And then Vince Foster dies, and it's according to James Norman, apparently connected to, Israel and nuclear, theft of sensitive nuclear secrets.
Well,
basically.
this is a great place to talk about. You call it Promise. I was reading it Promise, but one of the most fascinating parts of your book. This is software. It was created by a former NSA official and his wife. And then you write that it ended up in the hands of Israeli intelligence, where there was a trap door installed. And then that version was marketed to governments, corporations, high security laboratories, and it could essentially track anything, but it was particularly good at tracking money and people. And so there was a bugged version of the software. Israel had a version and the US had a version. Can you sort of spell that out? Because as you mentioned, Robert Maxwell ended up marketing this software, and it allowed it was like a double mirror. Once you had it installed, Israeli intelligence could essentially see everything that was happening
in real time. Yeah. The Promise software was basically a major global coup. And it was a global coup in two senses. So like you said, The Promise software was really good at doing two things: tracking people and tracking money. The tracking people side, I would argue, is really the focus of the Israeli version, and the tracking of money was more of the focus of the CIA with the collaboration of Systematics, a Jackson Stevens company, tied up with Vince Foster. And going back to Vince Foster, the way he was able to obtain those NSA documents was because of his role at Systematics, the Jackson Stevens company. Systematics was a contractor for the NSA. So, but essentially, the Promise software scandal, there's these two sides of it: the US version created with the CIA and the Israeli version. The Israeli version infinitely more successful in terms of sales than the CIA version. And the main salesman for the Israeli version was Robert Maxwell, who was already at the time an asset of Israeli intelligence, but became much more actively involved after he was directly recruited by a man named Rafi Eitan, a well-known Israeli spy master, also the handler for Jonathan Pollard, and a huge amount of espionage targeting the United States. And in doing so, Robert Maxwell sold Promise mostly to security agencies around the world. And it was, throughout in Latin America, in the United States, in Eastern Europe, and beyond. It's focusing mainly on security agencies. In the case of the US, though, it was mainly sold to nuclear laboratories or, federal laboratories like
What the
Sandia Labs and Los
fuck,
Alamos.
dude?
And the only way he was able to succeed in selling that software, because people at those labs tried to contact the NSA and like raise the alarm that something was seriously wrong here, and they were shut down, and the FBI investigation shut down, and the FBI today still will not release their documents about Robert Maxwell and Promise. That's insane. It's been a really long time. You think they could like release it if there's nothing there, but there obviously is. And one of the reasons, anyway, that he was allowed to access that is because Henry Kissinger told him exactly who to pay off and recruit for Israeli intelligence. So Henry Kissinger is a dirty, rotten traitor to the United States of America, and let us hope that 2023 is the year he finally dies, because it's intolerable being on the same planet as him. Anyway, sorry about that.
Yeah, no, Bitcoiners often talk about him. He engineered the petrodollar. So
yeah, he engineered a lot of things.
Yeah.
He's a pretty awful human being, and may he go soon. But anyway, Kissinger told him to pay off a guy named John Towers, who was the head of the Senate Armed Services Committee. He was a senator from Texas, and he was due to leave office. And and Maxwell, at the recommendation of Kissinger, puts Towers on the Mossad payroll and uses him to open the doors to Los Alamos.
I mean, I was so shocked that I had never heard about this Promise scandal before. And I just want to read this one paragraph because this was really shocking, and it makes you think about what is potentially happening today. In Latin America, Maxwell sold Promise to military dictatorships in Chile and Argentina. Their Promise was used to facilitate the mass murder that characterized Operation Condor, as the friends and families of dissidents and so-called subversives were easily identified using Promise. Promise was so effective for this purpose that just days after Maxwell sold the software to Guatemala, its US-backed dictatorship rounded up 20,000 subversives who were never heard from again. Of course, thanks to their backdoor, Israeli intelligence knew the identities of Guatemalans disappeared before the victims' own families.
What?
Yeah,
I mean,
it's nuts. And it's a template for what has been set up in the United States now. And during the same period of time in the 1980s, you had the enterprise of Iran-Contra fame within the national U.S. security state use Promise to create a database called MainCore, which was a database of U.S. perceived dissidents.
Big Minute Slapper, I do think that times have changed. I think the era of overt and in-your-face violence is sort of over, because people don't have a stomach for that shit anymore. I think these days it's far easier just to ignore most of us. So I don't think you're going to disappear. I don't think anyone's going to disappear. It's far easier just to ignore, because I can guarantee you right now, there's probably people that's come into this chat, saw what we're listening to, maybe listened for about 5 minutes and then left. Because they're like, fucking conspiracies, who gives a shit about this, right? And that's sort of what they're banking on. They invented this word, conspiracy theory, so that anything and everything they do, people will automatically think, oh, that's just a conspiracy theory. No, nothing to see here. This is just bullshit. And basically, whenever something happens that they don't like, they label that as a conspiracy theory. And then what ends up happening is most people don't want to be seen as a conspiracy theorist because it really does destroy your credibility. So what ends up happening is, even if what you hear kind of makes sense to you and you kind of go, okay, that might be true, because it's been labeled as a conspiracy theory, you're infinitely less likely to tout it or sort of adhere to it, because you don't want to be the weird fuck that somehow believed something that was so far out and sort of, makes you a conspiracy theorist. And I think that's what really makes things like that. It made their lives so much easier. The fact that they can literally just label everything that makes them look bad as a conspiracy theory, and you should really not even trust that. We will never know. It's just a narrative from a certain point of view. Or are you talking about what this girl is saying? Start getting ready for work. Have a good day. Donnie, take care of yourself, bro. Thanks so much for hanging out. I've got a live one. True. I quickly want to go to the bathroom, guys, so take a break. We'll be back in about 3 minutes. Flores, how you doing, bro? All right. Okay, we're just waiting for the ads to finish playing, about 50 seconds, and then we'll finish this. We're almost done. For those of you that would like to get into lighter topics. Although I have to say, this is the kind of shit I live for, bro. I trust nothing. Nothing. Everything about the government, I just instantly believe. Because I do believe that they're evil as fuck. Third world country? Oh, shit. There is. Well, if you didn't get any ads, that's great. But I know that there's still ads playing. And I don't want to start while the ads are playing, because then people will obviously miss a lot of this. And obviously that, for anyone that really cares about this, I don't want that to happen. Nightfire, how you doing, fam? Thanks for the follow, man. Really appreciate that. Welcome to the channel. Thank you, thank you, thank you. You caught us on a weird day. We're diving into the world of, well, the world falling down and everyone, like, being controlled. So, yeah. It's all good. I think the ads are done now. Yeah. Okay, so the ads are done. Let's get back into this.
Because you could be on there, not necessarily because you're like, I want to overthrow the government, but because you went to a protest once or you didn't pay your taxes on time and all
Right.
other sorts of reasons like that. And they plan to invoke it in the event of what they called a national emergency. But of course, that's a very vaguely defined term. And in their own documents, that national emergency could have been mass nonviolent mobilization against a US invasion of another country.
Well, I want to
So
come back to that because isn't Maine Core, that's essentially what Snowden was really frustrated about and eventually leaked, right? Or was that TIA?
he didn't talk about Maine Core, but it's very related to what
Okay.
Snowden did talk about. So the illegal
I'm good,
surveillance of
Deathmute. How are
Americans
you?
after September
Kalmazar, how you
11th,
doing, fam?
2001, is sucking up all your data. And he's right about that. It is illegal. It is unconstitutional. But what he didn't say, and maybe he didn't know, is that all that information you're profiled based on that today.
Right.
So if you are in the Maine Core database because you've been naughty, then under your name is everything the NSA and affiliated agencies. Because remember, the US has 18 intelligence agencies today. It's all under your name.
18?
And it's a lot of stuff.
18? Dude, what the fuck do they need all that intelligence for? Yeah, I genuinely did. That's the first time in my life that I've heard about this. You have the NSA, you have the CIA, and I guess we could call the FBI an intelligence organization. Who else? Like, who the fuck are the other, 15 companies?
For
Okay.
every American.
I want to come back to that when we finish up with sort of the idea of data surveillance and where this is going. But to end on the Promise scandal, what was interesting is that also led to another mysterious death. That was a journalist, right? Danny Casolaro, who was
Danny
reporting on
Casolaro. It's more deaths
that
than that. So John
BCC
Tower, who I
okay.
just mentioned, he dies in a very suspicious plane crash in early 1991. Robert Maxwell also dies in 1991. Danny Casolaro, the main journalist investigating Promise, dies in 1991 in what is staged as a suicide, but clearly not a suicide, as I point out pretty extensively in the book. And also one of Casolaro's main sources at the NSA, Alan Standorf, is found beat up and dead in the trunk of a car in 1991. So, and that's also again the same year William Barr is pardoning everyone involved in Iran-Contra. He commissions the BUA report, which is basically a whitewash of the whole Promise software scandal situation, and BCCI prevents investigations into BCCI. They're all really interrelated, as I point out in the book. Iran-Contra, Promise, and BCCI are really all
Octopus,
part of the same scandal.
Well, William Barr keeps coming up. Can you just kind of share, because he's so relevant today, what should people know about him?
Deathmute, thank you very much. I'd really appreciate that. Although I'm assuming not so much for the conspiracy streams that we do every once in a while. But you guys know I have to get my conspiracy fix. Usually I'll watch the shit on my own, but I wanted to watch it today, and I wouldn't have been able to enjoy anything else, so that's what we're watching. Grumfield, what's up?
Well, basically, he's a CIA mop-up man. He's been there to clean up the mess for these operations when too much gets exposed. Because, the national security state, the CIA, these institutions mess up a lot, and a lot more than you think leaks through. But they have to control the media response, which by consolidation of media ownership has become over the years even easier than ever before for them to do. But you also have to control. Really, it doesn't matter so much whether or not your operations are successful. You have to more than anything else control the cover up, right? And so if you have to control the cover up within the Justice Department or the FBI or those institutions, and then the mainstream media can come and just parrot whatever the FBI or Justice Department says, right? So that's essentially what William Barr's role has been. But I would argue it's even more.
It's interesting what she just said there. The conglomeration, I'm not even sure if that's the right word, but the unification and conglomeration of media companies. You have a couple of billionaires in the world that pretty much own all the media companies. Murdoch comes to mind here. In South Africa, you have what's his fucking name? Oh my god, Rupert, who owns like a shit ton of. He owns one company, and that one company owns a shit ton of companies, including American companies. So it's a South African company, but they own American news networks. And then you look at what journalism has become. So it used to be that this was journalists, right? They would go out, they would look for information, and they would basically try to find the truth wherever the truth may be. These days, what do journalists do? Like, go on any newspaper article, like literally open your phone, the app, your news app right now, yeah? So I'm opening my news app right now. I'm going to choose a story. So we have a story here about SA's longest beach disappearing fast. If I open this story, it's Twitter messages and just sort of things that the politicians have said, right, about it. Cape Town could embark on a rapid build of green generating capacity. Again, it's just going to be sort of parroting what everyone around it has said. There's no evidence of anything. Like, none of this has actually been researched. It's basically just an easy collection of different Twitter posts and Facebook posts and WhatsApp messages, effectively. That's all they do. They just go around and tout whatever the fuck. So a good example of this is Ramaphosa have just announced that Eskom is changing hands, right? And there's going to be a new department that runs Eskom. But if you read the article, you will find that there's no counter thoughts. At no point do they highlight what experts have said about this. At no point do they do any investigations into whether or not this could actually be used for corruption or anything like that, especially in a country like South Africa where corruption is everywhere. They literally just tout a series of quotes about what the president have said. That's it. That's all they do. That's what journalism has become. It's a parroting operation. You just parrot whatever the politicians say.
More than that, when you look at things that happened during the Trump administration, what William Barr did during the Trump administration, which hardly anyone knows about, is that he legalized pre-crime arrests in the United States. You can be arrested for stuff you publish on social media, and they call it
Here you go. And this isn't even all of it. This is just some of it, right? So you have News Corp, 21st Century Fox, and they own all of this. You have Sony, they own all of this. Viacom, they own all of this. Disney owns all of this. Comcast owns all of this. So you have what? 6 companies. 6 companies at the top that controls literally everything. Dude, how do we, like, how can you even begin to imagine that this shit is free or fair or the truth? So my question to you would be, let's say, for example, Comcast was doing incredibly evil shit. And if I speak to people that have Comcast internet, I would say they're probably doing incredibly evil shit. Do you think NBC will cover that story? Sorry. Like, would NBC, how would they? How would they be able to cover a story about Comcast when Comcast is the actual owner of the news network? And then, of course, Comcast's owner, oh my shit, Heathen with the 5 community subs. Can I get some love in chat? Thank you, fam. Pepsi, welcome back. Or have you been here the whole time? Hope you got into the new year well. Heathen, it's getting better. I really appreciate that, bro. Yeah, the new year's treating me very well. We're just scaring the shit out of ourselves by learning that our entire world is a fucking lie. That's basically what's happening here. And then soon we'll have the WoW content Q&A, which is infinitely more fun than this. Because at least in WoW, you know it's a fantasy world. It doesn't matter, right? Whereas this shit does actually matter. This is scary as fuck. It bothers me that more people don't find it scary as fuck.
It's called, the acronym is DEEP. I forget exactly what it stands for. I think it's Disruption and Early Engagement Program. And by early engagement, it means they arrest you before you actually commit a crime. It's pre-crime. And there have been people in the
Jesus.
US that have already been
Wait,
arrested
what did
because
she
of
just
the
say?
Justice Department or the FBI or those institutions. And then the mainstream media can come and just parrot whatever the FBI or Justice Department says, right? So that's
Mhm.
essentially what William Barr's role has been. But I would argue it's even more than that when you look at things that happened during the Trump administration. What William Barr did during the Trump administration, which hardly anyone knows about, is that he legalized pre-crime arrests in the United States. You can be arrested for stuff you publish on social media, and they call it it's called, the acronym is DEEP. I forget exactly what it stands for. I think it's Disruption and
They have that now in the UK as well. I don't know if anyone's ever been like actually arrested in the US, but I know in the UK, if you say, for example, in the UK, if you are, let's take something that is actually egregious, right? So let's say you're anti-Muslim, yeah, you don't like all the